Picture a story where wishes come true. A whopping $500 million windfall and control of a booming business. That's the reality that unfolded for us as Nora, my sister-in-law, joyfully celebrated our family's newfound wealth. Among the staff, whispers spread like wildfire as they soaked in the news. With a triumphant tone, Nora announced, "Quiet, please. It's time for my husband to step into his role at the company and claim his $3 million share." Her words triggered laughter among the employees, intrigued by the sudden twist. In the midst of the excitement, my older brother Jack pored over legal papers passed to him by our family's lawyer. His face drained of color as he absorbed the contents of our father's will. "Take a look at this," he whispered to Nora, who gasped in shock as she read the document. "Hi there. I'm Stella, a 26-year-old who's been deeply involved in my dad's business since I was little. I've seen him build it up from scratch into the success it is today. Even when things got tough at the start, he never gave up. And that really inspired me. As the business grew, I wanted to help out, especially since my mom handled a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff. My parents always encouraged me to choose my own path after high school, but I knew I wanted to be part of Dad's legacy. That feeling only got stronger as I got older. When I finally joined the family business, I was lucky to have Leo, a longtime employee, show me the ropes. He taught me all about how things work without treating me differently because I'm the boss's kid. Learning from him gave me a real understanding of what we do and how to do it well. Meanwhile, my brother Jack, who's just a year older than me, was off studying management, planning to take over from Dad one day. He'd often talk about it with his friends, confident that he was meant to lead the company someday. This tale peels back the layers of family dynamics, inheritance, and the pursuit of success within a business setting. It challenges the idea that privilege equals entitlement, instead highlighting the importance of earning one's place through hard work and dedication. As the story unfolds, unexpected twists shine a light on the true meaning of legacy and responsibility. My brother Jack led a life cushioned by stability and certainty, the envy of many of his friends. "You're so lucky," they'd say, eyeing the secure future Jack had courtesy of our family's business. The conversation often turned to me, his younger sister, sparking curiosity about any potential rivalry for control of the company. "Oh, my sister. She's around, but she's more a behind-the-scenes type," Jack would explain, somewhat brushing off any speculation. Jack had his own approach to getting ready for leadership, spending extravagantly and enjoying socializing under the guise of gaining management experience. He knew that being the future president made him popular, especially with women attracted to his status. Among many admirers, he picked Nora, the most dazzling of them all, as his wife. Their wedding was a spectacle, followed by a lavish honeymoon and the building of a grand mansion to start their luxurious life together. Nora seemed perfectly content in her role, living in luxury and always having things her way with Jack. Compared to her, my life seemed ordinary, quietly working alongside my mother in the company. I was happy with my behind-the-scenes role, far from the glitz and glamour Nora enjoyed. During family gatherings, Nora often looked at me with a hint of superiority in her laughter. "You don't really fit the image of a CEO's daughter," she'd say, finding the idea amusing. I never understood Nora's fascination with extravagant living, a lifestyle that felt foreign to me. She probed, unable to grasp why someone born into wealth would show little interest in flaunting it. "Living so simply despite your family's riches, I just don't get it," she'd say, as if the idea of not showcasing wealth was beyond her comprehension. This difference in our lifestyles highlighted our contrasting values and viewpoints. While Nora valued material possessions and social status, I found fulfillment in quietly contributing to our family's legacy. It wasn't about money or titles for me. It was about being part of something meaningful. Despite being the daughter of the company's president, as my brother often pointed out, I didn't seek attention or special treatment. I believed in treating my colleagues with respect, just like anyone else. My approach to work and relationships within the company was rooted in humility and mutual learning. I recognized that many of my coworkers had skills and knowledge surpassing mine, and I respected the importance of every role within our organization. My brother held firm to the belief that a boss must always maintain an air of superiority to command respect from their team. He was surprised by my perspective and criticized my approach, insisting that a true leader should assert dominance and delegate mundane tasks to others. According to him, This mindset separated the real leaders in our family from the rest. When I tried to defend my viewpoint, stressing the importance of respecting all team members regardless of their role, my brother quickly dismissed my arguments. He claimed that such thinking would make me unappealing to potential partners. Nora joined in, suggesting that my attitude and outlook on life would leave me alone forever, advising me to change to become more attractive. My brother even threatened my job security once he took over the company, highlighting our vastly different values and approaches to leadership and personal relationships. Following the uncomfortable confrontation, my mother stepped in with her support, reminding me of the value I brought to the company and advising me not to let my brother's criticisms affect me. My father also made his disapproval of my brother's attitude clear with his stern demeanor. It was evident that my parents didn't share my brother and Nora's views, leading to a tense period where they avoided our family home. Reflecting on the strain caused by this disagreement, I realized that despite our differences, it was crucial for each of us to stay true to our principles. While my brother and Nora continued their lavish lifestyle, frequenting fancy restaurants and luxurious resorts to maintain a certain image, I remained dedicated to my values. I focused on making meaningful contributions to our family business, cherishing the importance of humility and teamwork that I had learned over time. Jack was on track to become the president of our father's company, a role he was being prepared for as our father worked diligently to expand his business. One evening at home, my father suddenly felt intense chest pains. Worried, I urged him to stay calm while I called for an ambulance. In those tense moments, he directed me to a letter in a drawer, insisting, "Stella, read this. If anything happens to me, the lawyers will handle the rest." His words were barely out before he lost consciousness, and despite being rushed to the hospital, he passed away without regaining consciousness. Jack and Nora, my brother and his wife, were abroad during this crisis and missed being with our father during his final moments. They returned from their vacation 3 days later, just in time for the funeral. Jack's comment, "We're just glad we made it on time. Never thought Dad would pass while we were away," struck me as insensitive. Their casual arrival and failure to acknowledge the efforts my mother and I put into organizing the funeral were deeply disheartening. I was surprised by his criticism, especially since my mother and I had carefully chosen the menu together. I told him I didn't appreciate being told what to do, explaining that his behavior showed a lack of understanding of true leadership. Jack didn't stop at bossing me around. He also gave orders to the employees, including Leo, a highly respected member of our company. When I heard Jack ordering Leo, I stepped in and scolded my brother for his disrespectful attitude. Jack argued back, asking why he should have to show humility to an employee and insisting that he deserved more respect as the future president. Nora supported Jack's actions and threatened to fire me if I continued to challenge him. Suddenly, a man interrupted our heated argument. He introduced himself as the lawyer who had been handling our father's affairs, including his will, something my father had mentioned to me before he passed away. This news caught Jack and Nora's attention, especially when the topic of inheritance came up. They eagerly welcomed the lawyer, hoping to learn more about the fortune they expected to inherit. As they discussed the inheritance, Jack became emotional, asking about the rumored $500 million. Nora couldn't contain her excitement at the thought of such wealth, seeing it as their ticket to a dream life. This announcement caused a buzz among the employees, but Nora quickly hushed them, proudly anticipating their imminent rise to power. This situation really showed the contrast in values and priorities within our family, especially between Jack and Nora's focus on material wealth and my dedication to honoring my father's legacy with respect and humility. The lawyer's arrival signaled the start of a new chapter, one that would reveal my father's true intentions for his inheritance and the company's future. When everyone expected the company and a $500 million inheritance to go to Jack, the contents of the will caused quite a stir among the employees. One of them couldn't help but laugh, and soon it became clear why. As Jack and Nora read the will, they were shocked to discover that the entire company was to be passed on to me, the eldest daughter. Jack was visibly stunned, his face turning pale as he protested, insisting there must be some mistake. The lawyer present during this confrontation confirmed the legality of the will, which only made Jack more agitated and unwilling to accept the decision. He argued that our father must have been mentally unfit when making such choices, suggesting they were invalid. This attack on our father's judgment pushed me over the edge. I defended our father's honor and integrity, refusing to accept Jack's claim to lead the company. My brother reached his breaking point as I openly questioned his qualifications, highlighting his lack of contribution to the company's well-being. Jack and Nora defended themselves, claiming they had prepared for his presidency by building a luxurious mansion and living a lavish lifestyle. I countered, emphasizing that these surface-level actions didn't prove leadership or business sense. Furthermore, I revealed the letter from our father detailing the financial support he had given Jack, including the mansion and other extravagances, which was actually an advance on Jack's inheritance, significantly reducing his share. Nora panicked upon hearing this, realizing the implications of the will and letter. The whole situation played out as a clash between expectations and reality, exposing the deep divisions within our family over our father's company's legacy and the true qualities of leadership and responsibility. When the $500 million inheritance was mentioned, Nora's confusion and frustration were evident. Wait, so the whole inheritance is only worth $500 million? Have we really spent that much already? This doesn't seem fair, she lamented. An employee who had previously laughed stepped forward to clarify for Nora that the $500 million represented the company's value, not personal wealth available for inheritance. Nora struggled to understand this distinction, unable to grasp that company funds weren't meant to be divided up as personal inheritance. I explained to her that the company's wealth was meant for its growth and sustainability, not personal inheritance, meaning Jack's share of any personal inheritance would be minimal. This revelation visibly shook her, showing a clear misunderstanding of the difference between company assets and personal wealth. At this point, Jack seemed to have a moment of realization or perhaps denial. He turned to the employees, questioning their support for me as president over him, arguing that leadership was his birthright due to the charisma he believed he shared with our father. However, the silence that followed spoke volumes. None of the employees came to his defense. Leo, a veteran and respected figure in the company, then addressed Jack directly. He contrasted the genuine charisma and foundational legacy of our father with Jack's misplaced arrogance. Leo's words resonated, emphasizing a respect earned through actions and humility rather than entitlement. He pointed out Jack's absence and lack of contribution to the company's daily operations, dismissing Jack's excuses of networking as irrelevant to the real work needed to sustain and grow the business. In contrast, Leo praised my efforts to understand and contribute to the company from the ground up, acknowledging the sincerity and dedication I shared with our father. This endorsement from Leo and the collective agreement from other employees highlighted a shared acknowledgement of my suitability for leadership, based not on entitlement but on commitment and respect for the legacy and future of the company. Touched by their support, I felt a renewed sense of responsibility and gratitude. The employees' acknowledgement of my efforts and their trust in my leadership validated the path I had chosen, one that honored my father's values and our company's collective ambition. I thanked the employees, recognizing the unexpected turn of events, but emphasizing my dedication to the company, a passion inherited from my father. I asked for their ongoing support, and their warm applause strengthened my determination. I then emphasized the importance of every team member, stating, "Anyone who disregards this isn't fit for a leadership role," hinting that even a president could be held accountable. Jack was taken aback by my words. "What do you mean? I'm your brother, and you're saying you'd fire me if I were president?" Jack protested, confused by my prioritization of competence over family ties. He looked for support, but the employees' cool responses indicated their agreement with my viewpoint. Feeling isolated, Jack and Nora swiftly left the scene. After the incident, Jack found himself without a job, relying on the modest inheritance he had received, which quickly dwindled. "Can you lend me some money, Stella?" he later asked. However, faced with his ongoing lack of effort to find work, I was put off by his dependency. I advised our mother against offering financial assistance, pointing out his fall from grace and the loss of his once supportive friends. Nora, who had envisioned a life of luxury as the company president's wife, also received little sympathy from her social circle after these events. Eventually, financial strain led them to sell their mansion, a temporary solution that briefly restored their extravagant lifestyle but proved unsustainable in the long run. Their savings dried up, and when they finally considered getting jobs, their lack of experience and their tarnished reputation made them unemployable. These events highlighted the consequences of entitlement and the importance of hard work, humility, and maintaining good relationships. In the ups and downs of life, Jack found himself in a new role far from his previous aspirations. He secured a part-time job at a convenience store, a significant change from his earlier plans. This job, unfamiliar and challenging, placed him alongside younger colleagues who often noticed his lack of experience. It was a humbling experience, forcing Jack to confront the realities he had previously overlooked. Nora also experienced a significant shift in her daily life. Her days as a full-time housewife, once filled with leisure and luxury, were replaced by the demands of part-time work. She took on a role as a cashier in a supermarket, working long hours for modest pay. This new chapter for Nora was marked by hard work and perseverance, a departure from her previous expectations. As my brother and sister-in-law adjusted to their new circumstances, I utilized the knowledge and insights gained from my behind-the-scenes work in the company. With the guidance of Leo and our dedicated team, we concentrated on expanding the business, drawing strength from the challenges we encountered. The ordeal with my brother not only tested our determination but also strengthened our unity. Together, we strive to honor my father's legacy by growing the company and fostering a sense of community and achievement among our employees. This contrast in our paths highlighted life's unpredictability and emphasized the importance of adaptability, humility, and hard work. While Jack and Nora adapted to their new realities, their journey served as a reminder of the lessons learned from overcoming adversity. As for me, I remained committed to leading our family business forward, treasuring the wisdom of the past while building a brighter future for everyone involved, fulfilling a promise to honor our father's memory.
Numbers never lie. That's what my father always told me. While my brother James was learning to smooth clients and charm investors, I was learning the language of spreadsheets and financial statements. Dad understood. He built Sullivan Global Enterprises from nothing, and he knew that behind every successful company was someone who understood its true story through its numbers. The real power isn't in the boardroom, Emily, he'd say, reviewing quarterly reports with me late into the night. It's in knowing what these numbers mean. They tell you everything, if you know how to listen. I was listening now, staring at my computer screen at 2 a.m., my office dark except for the soft glow of monitors. The numbers were telling me something was very wrong at Sullivan Global. Still here, sis. James's voice made me jump. My brother stood in the doorway, impeccable in his tailored suit despite the late hour. You know, normal people go home sometimes. I minimized the spreadsheet quickly, but not before noting the discrepancy in the Asian subsidiaries' accounts. $50 million that seemed to appear and disappear like magic. Just finishing up the quarterly audit, I said carefully. Someone has to keep track of the details. James laughed, that rich, confident laugh that had charmed countless investors and business partners. Always the diligent one. That's our Emily, stuck in the details while the rest of us focus on the big picture. The big picture. Like the mysterious new investors James had brought in 3 months ago, right after Dad's stroke. Like the sudden restructuring of our Asian operations. Like the offshore accounts I discovered hidden in layers of shell companies. The board meetings on Monday, James continued, walking into my office uninvited, as always. I'll need the financial reports by tomorrow afternoon. There are some irregularities I need to check first, I said, watching his reaction carefully, especially in the Asian divisions. Just clean it up and sign off. He cut me off, his smile never wavering. You know how these international operations can be. Lots of moving parts. Moving parts. Like the $50 million that kept moving in ways that defied both accounting principles and legal regulations. James, I started. As CFO, I have responsibility. As CFO. He laughed again, but there was an edge to it now. Emily, let's be real. You're CFO, because Dad felt guilty about giving me the CEO position. We both know who really runs this company. The words stung, but I kept my face neutral. 15 years I'd worked here, starting in the accounting department right out of college. I'd earned my CPA, then my MBA, worked my way up while James spent his time at charity galas and golf courses. When Dad promoted me to CFO 5 years ago, it wasn't guilt. It was recognition of the 100-hour weeks I'd put in, the millions I'd saved the company through careful financial management. The numbers don't lie, James, I said quietly, echoing Dad's words. And these numbers are telling me something's wrong. His smile vanished. The numbers tell whatever story we need them to tell. That's business, sis. Maybe if you'd spent less time with your spreadsheets and more time in the real world, you'd understand that. I opened my mouth to argue, but my phone buzzed. A text from Maria, my assistant. They're deleting files from the servers, trading records, wire transfers, everything. My heart stopped. I'd asked Maria to monitor the system after hours, suspecting something like this might happen. But I'd hoped I was wrong, hoped my own brother wouldn't. I can't sign off on these reports, I said, standing up. Not until I understand where this money is really going. James's face hardened. Actually, you won't be signing anything. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. The board has voted to terminate your position, effective immediately. The board? I stared at him. There hasn't been a board meeting. Emergency session. Conference call. Your concerns about our international operations were deemed disruptive to company stability. He dropped the envelope on my desk. Clean out your office. Security will escort you out. You can't do this, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I saw 2 security guards appear in the doorway. Dad trusted me too. Dad's in a hospital bed, James snapped. And this company needs real leadership, not some accountant obsessing over decimal points. Get out, Emily. You're done here. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and for the first time, I saw him clearly. The designer suit couldn't hide the desperation in his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands. Whatever he was involved in, it was bigger than I'd imagined. Silently, I gathered my personal items into a box. Pictures of Dad and me at my MBA graduation. The calculator he'd given me on my first day of work. The family photo from better days, before Mom passed, before James decided success meant something different than Dad had taught us. Your company laptop and phone stay here, James said, watching me pack. And Emily, don't try anything stupid. Remember who has the power here. I walked out without a word, past the security guards, past Maria's empty desk, past the portrait of Dad in the lobby. In my car, I pulled out my personal phone and sent 2 messages. First, to Maria, download everything. Use the secure server we discussed. Then to a number I'd hoped I'd never have to use. Robert Torres, my old college roommate, now a senior investigator with the SEC. Remember when you said you owed me a favor? I need it now. Finally, I opened my briefcase and removed the external hard drive I'd been updating daily for the past 3 months, ever since I'd first noticed the discrepancies, ever since James had started having private meetings with people who didn't show up in any official records. The numbers tell you everything, Dad's voice echoed in my memory, if you know how to listen. I'd been listening, Dad, and on Monday, everyone else would hear what the numbers had been telling me. James thought he'd won, thought firing me would silence the questions, bury the truth under layers of corporate bureaucracy and creative accounting. He forgot one crucial detail. I'd been tracking every number, every transaction, every lie for months. And I had proof of all of it. In my rearview mirror, I watched as the lights of Sullivan Global's headquarters grew distant. James would be calling emergency meetings now, trying to cover his tracks. But he'd never been good with details. Never understood that true power wasn't in the boardroom. It was in the numbers. Monday's board meeting would change everything. James just didn't know it yet. The weekend stretched before me like a battlefield waiting to be mapped. Sitting in my home office, surrounded by financial documents and hard drives, I began to piece together the puzzle I'd been collecting for months. "Maria, what's our status?" I asked during our secure video call. My assistant, though technically now my ex-assistant, had worked through the night. "I've got everything," she confirmed, dark circles under her eyes. Trading records, wire transfers, emails. James didn't just delete files. He tried to rewrite them, but he doesn't know about our backup server. I smiled grimly. James had always underestimated the tech nerds, as he called them. What about the Asian subsidiaries? That's where it gets interesting. Maria shared her screen, showing a complex web of transactions. Remember that $50 million that kept disappearing? I traced it. They've been using our legitimate Asian operations as a front for money laundering. I finished, the pieces finally clicking into place. The new investors James brought in after Dad's stroke. They're using our company to clean dirty money. The scope of it was staggering. For 3 months, they've been running a sophisticated scheme, using Sullivan Global's reputation and international presence to make illegal funds appear legitimate. No wonder James had been so desperate to keep me away from the real numbers. My phone buzzed. Robert Torres from the SEC. "Emily," his voice was serious. "I've reviewed what you sent. This is bigger than corporate fraud. We're talking international money laundering, possible connections to organized crime. Are you sure you want to get involved?" "These people are destroying my father's company," I replied. "I don't have a choice." "Then we do this officially. I'm bringing in my team." "But Emily, be careful. People like this, they don't just fire whistleblowers." After hanging up, I received an unexpected call from Samuel Wong, our longtime head of Asian operations. "Miss Sullivan," he said quietly, "I heard about what happened. There's something you should know. Your brother's new partners. They visited our offices last month, made certain demands. When I refused, they threatened my family. My blood ran cold. Why didn't you tell me sooner? They were watching us, but now that you're out, I have documents, records of meetings, things they didn't know I kept. Send everything, securely, and Samuel, get your family somewhere safe." Throughout Saturday, more allies emerged. Junior accountants who'd noticed discrepancies but been afraid to speak up. It's staff who'd been ordered to modify records. Even our old family lawyer who'd resigned rather than sign off on suspicious documents. "Your father would be proud," he told me. "He always said you were the one who truly understood the business." But James wasn't idle. By Saturday evening, Maria reported that he'd called an emergency executive meeting. They were planning to present a completely revised set of financial statements at Monday's board meeting, ones that would hide all traces of their illegal activities. "They're going to pin any irregularities on you," Maria warned. "Paint you as a disgruntled employee making false accusations." I worked through the night, organizing evidence, building an airtight case. Every transaction, every fraudulent record, every altered document carefully cataloged and cross-referenced. The numbers told a story of betrayal, greed, and corruption, but also of hubris. James and his partners had been so confident in their scheme that they'd left trails everywhere. Sunday morning brought an unexpected visitor, Lisa Chen, one of our largest legitimate investors. "Something felt wrong about the recent reports," she said, sitting in my living room. "The numbers didn't add up. When I asked questions, your brother gave smooth answers, but no real explanations. And now I'm worried about my investment and about George Sullivan's legacy. Your father built this company on integrity, Emily. He trusted you to protect that." I showed her some of what I'd discovered. Her face hardened as she understood the implications. "The board needs to see this," she said. "All of it. I'll make sure they do." But we weren't the only ones preparing for Monday. That afternoon, I received a warning from our head of security. James had hired private investigators to dig up dirt on me. "They're trying to discredit you," he said. "Looking for anything they can use. Bad investments, personal scandals, even old college photos." I almost laughed. Let them look. I'd spent my life focused on work, on learning the business, on making Dad proud. The worst they'd find would be some boring tax returns and a lot of late nights at the office. As Sunday evening approached, Maria called with urgent news. "They're planning to announce a major restructuring tomorrow," she said, "spinning off the Asian operations into a separate company. Once that happens, tracing the money will become almost impossible." I looked at the family photo on my desk. Dad, Mom, James and me at the company's 20th anniversary celebration. We were all smiling, proud of what our family had built. How had we gone from that to this? My phone buzzed with a text from James. "It's not too late to back down, sis. Take the severance package. Walk away. Some things are better left alone." I didn't reply. Instead, I sent one final email to Robert Torres, attaching the last pieces of evidence. "Everything's ready," I wrote. "Your team knows what to do." His response was immediate. "We'll be there. Just make sure the board stays in that room long enough to hear the truth." I spent the final hours of Sunday going over every detail one last time. The evidence was clear, irrefutable. But evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed to present it in a way that even James couldn't talk his way around. Dad's voice echoed in my memory. "Numbers tell stories, Emily, but it's people who have to listen." Tomorrow, they would have no choice but to listen. Tomorrow, every number, every transaction, every lie would be exposed. I picked up the family photo, touching Dad's face behind the glass. "I'll fix this," I promised. "Whatever it takes." Monday morning dawned cold and clear. I arrived at Sullivan Global's headquarters early, parking in my old spot out of habit. The security guard at the front desk, Mike, who'd watched me grow up in these halls, looked torn between duty and loyalty. "Miss Sullivan, I'm supposed to," he began. "She's with me," Lisa Chen interrupted, appearing at my side. As a major shareholder, her authority couldn't be questioned. "We're here for the board meeting." James had chosen the largest conference room for today's meeting, no doubt planning to make a show of the company's bright future. As board members filed in, I sat quietly in the back, ignoring the whispers and stares. At exactly 9 a.m., James strode in, flanked by his new partners. Men in expensive suits whose names appeared nowhere in official company records. He faltered slightly when he saw me, but recovered quickly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began smoothly, "thank you for coming. Before we begin, I should address the elephant in the room. My sister Emily, our former CFO, has made some unfortunate accusations. Accusations? I stood up. No, James. I've made discoveries, and the board needs to hear them. Emily, he said, his smile strained. You're not authorized to be here. Security? Actually, Lisa Chin interrupted. As a major shareholder, I've invited Ms. Sullivan to present her findings. The board deserves to hear both sides. James's new partners shifted uncomfortably. One reached for his phone, but at that moment, the conference room doors opened again. Robert Torres walked in, followed by a team of SEC investigators. Nobody leave this room, Torres announced, showing his credentials. And please, everyone turn off your phones. What is this? James demanded, but I could see the fear breaking through his polished facade. This, I said, connecting my laptop to the projector, is what happens when you forget that numbers don't lie. For the next hour, I laid out everything. The money laundering scheme disguised as legitimate international trade, the falsified records, the threats against employees who asked questions. With each revelation, I watched James's face grow paler. These accusations are ridiculous, one of his partners interjected. You can't prove. Actually, Samuel Wong's voice came through the video conference screen. She can. Our head of Asian operations proceeded to share his own documentation, including recordings of threatening conversations. James tried one last time. The company needs this restructuring. We're expanding, growing. You're destroying everything Dad built. I cut him off. And for what? To impress these criminals? To feel powerful? You don't understand business. He spat. You never did. You were just an accountant. No, a weak voice said from the doorway. She's my daughter. Everyone turned. There, in a wheelchair pushed by his nurse, was our father. Dad? James whispered. You're supposed to be in the hospital. Lisa called me, Dad said, his voice thin but clear. Told me what was happening to my company, to my family. His eyes met mine, filled with tears and pride. Show them, Emily. Show them what you found. I pulled up the final set of documents, the complete trail of every illegal transaction, every falsified record, every dollar that had been laundered through our legitimate businesses. The SEC has everything, I announced. So do the FBI and Interpol. It's over, James. What happened next was chaos. James's partners tried to flee, but found federal agents waiting outside. James himself seemed to collapse inward, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Dad, he pleaded, I was trying to make the company bigger better. You were trying to make yourself bigger, Dad corrected sadly. Emily understood what I've always taught. Success means nothing without integrity. The next few hours were a blur of federal agents, statements, and arrests. James and his partners were led out in handcuffs. The board voted immediately to remove him as CEO and freeze all suspicious operations. Then came the surprise. The company needs leadership it can trust, Dad announced to the board. Someone who understands both the numbers and the values this company was built on. He looked at me. Emily, will you take the position? I stared at him, then at the board members who were nodding in agreement. Dad, are you sure? He smiled. That warm, proud smile I remembered from childhood. I've never been more sure of anything. The aftermath was both easier and harder than I expected. The company's stock took a hit when the news broke, but our transparency about the situation and immediate corrective actions helped restore investor confidence. Many of James's illegal deals could be unwound, saving us from major losses. More challenging was the personal cost. James faced serious criminal charges. Mom's old friends stopped inviting us to social events. But Dad was there every step of the way, back in the office part-time, helping me rebuild what had almost been lost. 6 months later, I sat in what had been James's office, my office now, looking at the same family photo I'd kept through everything. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. "Miss Sullivan?" Maria entered, now officially my chief of staff. "The new compliance team is ready for your review, and the Asian division reports record legitimate profits this quarter." I smiled. Dad always said, "The numbers never lie," she finished with a grin. "We know." That evening, I visited James in prison. He looked different, smaller somehow, without his expensive suits and confident smile. "I'm sorry," he said, not meeting my eyes. "I forgot what Dad taught us, about what really matters." "The company's doing well," I told him. "Honestly well. When you get out, if you want to learn the right way." He nodded slowly. "Maybe start me in accounting." I laughed, the first real laugh we'd shared in years. "We'll see." Later, having dinner with Dad in his favorite restaurant, I asked the question that had been bothering me. "Did you know, when you made me CFO, that something like this might happen?" He set down his fork. "I knew James was charming but careless. And I knew you were not just an accountant. You were someone who understood that numbers are really about people, about trust, about doing things right." He squeezed my hand. "You saved more than the company, Emily. You saved our family's legacy." Looking at him, I realized he was right. Sullivan Global wasn't just about balance sheets and profit margins. It was about the values behind the numbers, the trust we'd rebuilt, the lessons we'd learned. James had thought power came from corner offices and fancy titles, but Dad had been right all along. Real power came from understanding the truth in the numbers and having the courage to stand by that truth, no matter the cost. Today, Sullivan Global is stronger than ever. Our compliance department is the industry standard. Young accountants fight for internships here, knowing they'll learn more than just numbers. They'll learn integrity. And in my office, next to the family photo, sits a new plaque with Dad's old saying, "Numbers never lie, but it takes wisdom to hear what they're telling you." James gets out of prison next year. Yesterday, he sent me his application for an entry-level position in our accounting department. I smiled as I approved it. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone. It's about showing them a better way. One honest number at a time. Success comes in many forms, but my family only recognized one. The corporate ladder climbed exactly the way they thought it should be. I'm Alexander Mitchell, and this is the story of how I went from being the family disappointment to the one signing their paychecks. Growing up in the affluent suburbs of Chicago, everything in my life was measured against my siblings' achievements. My older brother Michael was the golden child, Harvard Business School graduate, and rising star at Goldman Sachs. My sister Diana was the perfect corporate attorney, making partner at her firm by 30. And then there was me, the youngest, who dared to think differently. Another startup, Alex? Mom would sigh whenever I mentioned my latest venture. When are you going to get a real job like your siblings? She'd worked at Meridian Technologies for 20 years, climbing from junior analyst to senior vice president of operations. The corporate world was her religion, and my refusal to join, it was nothing short of heresy. Dad wasn't much better. As a retired investment banker, he measured success in quarterly reports and profit margins. My early attempts at entrepreneurship were met with thinly veiled disappointment. You know, he'd say during our weekly family dinners, Michael's firm is always looking for analysts. With your degree from Northwestern, you'd be a shoo-in. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been building something bigger than they could imagine. While they saw me bouncing between startups, I was actually executing a carefully crafted plan. It started 5 years ago when I noticed a gap in the tech security market. Companies were spending millions on cybersecurity, but their physical security systems were stuck in the past. I founded Mitchell Security Solutions with $50,000 borrowed from my savings and a vision of integrating AI with physical security infrastructure. The first 2 years were brutal. I worked from my garage, living on ramen and coffee, pouring every penny back into development. My family's comments grew increasingly pointed. "Still playing with your little security company?" Michael would smirk during holiday gatherings. "Let me know if you need a real job. I can put in a word at Goldman." Diana was more direct. "You're embarrassing the family, Alex. Do you know how it looks when people ask what my brother does, and I have to say you work from your garage?" But I had a secret weapon they knew nothing about. Dr. James Anderson, my old professor from Northwestern and one of the leading experts in AI development. He saw the potential in my ideas and became my mentor, opening doors they didn't even know existed. "Keep quiet about it," he advised when we secured our first major contract. "Let them underestimate you. It'll make the revelation so much sweeter." That first contract led to others. Major banks, tech companies, and eventually government facilities began adopting our security systems. I moved operations to a real office but kept the company private, operating through shell corporations to maintain anonymity. The press called me reclusive. I called it strategic. 3 years in, something unexpected happened. Meridian Technologies, my mother's company, announced they were looking to acquire a security firm to modernize their infrastructure. Mom couldn't stop talking about it at family dinners. "It's going to be the biggest acquisition in company history," she'd boast. "They're looking at all the top firms. Of course, they'd never consider one of those small startups." I smiled and passed the potatoes. What she didn't know was that Mitchell Security Solutions had already caught Meridian's attention. Our AI-driven security systems were years ahead of the competition, and our client list was impressive, even if no one knew who owned the company. The acquisition talks were handled through intermediaries. I let my team handle the meetings while I worked behind the scenes. Mom would come home excited about the mysterious company that might save Meridian's security division, never realizing she was talking about her disappointment of a son. Then came the twist that would change everything. During the negotiations, we discovered that Meridian's security infrastructure was weaker than they'd admitted. They weren't just looking for an acquisition. They desperately needed one to prevent a potential security catastrophe. I could have walked away, let them scramble to find another solution. But I saw an opportunity for something better. Instead of a simple acquisition, I proposed a merger that would effectively give Mitchell Security Solutions control of Meridian's entire security division. The board was desperate enough to agree. The final detail? I would become CEO of the merged companies. The papers were signed on a Tuesday. The announcement would be made the following Monday. And in between, Thanksgiving at the Mitchell family home. Mom had been especially insistent about attendance this year. "The CEO is coming," she announced proudly. "He wants to meet the whole family before the big announcement on Monday." What she didn't know was that I'd arranged it deliberately, chosen this moment for maximum impact. The paperwork was signed, the deals were done, and there was nothing anyone could do to change it. Thanksgiving morning arrived crisp and clear. I pulled up to my parents' house in my usual Honda Civic. No need to spoil the surprise with the Porsche just yet. Mom was in full hostess mode, directing caterers and fussing over place settings. "Alex, at least tell me you're wearing the suit I bought you," she said by way of greeting. "Don't worry, Mom. I'm dressed appropriately for the occasion." Michael arrived next, stepping out of his luxury car with his wife Jessica, both dressed like they'd stepped out of a corporate catalog. Diana followed shortly after, already checking emails on her phone. "Look who finally learned to be on time," Diana smirked, eyeing my casual arrival. "Though you could have dressed better for Mom's big day." I just smiled and helped carry dishes to the dining room. As guests began arriving, Mom's colleagues from Meridian, all eager to be present for what they knew would be a historic announcement. The comments about my career choices grew more frequent. "Still working on that startup?" one of Mom's colleagues asked, not bothering to hide his condescension. "Something like that," I replied, checking my watch. Almost time. We gathered around the massive dining table, 24 people in all. Mom was practically glowing with pride as she introduced her executive colleagues, saving the most important announcement for last. "And of course, we're waiting for one more special guest," she said, beaming. "The CEO himself is joining us." That's when she turned to me, her smile faltering slightly. "Alex is still finding himself," she announced to the table, unlike his successful siblings. The doorbell rang. That must be him. Mom stood quickly, smoothing her dress. Dr. Anderson walked in, his presence commanding immediate attention. He'd agreed to play along with my plan, understanding the importance of timing. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said formally, then turned to me. "Sir, the board is ready for your decision about Monday's announcement." The silence that fell over the table was deafening. Mom's wineglass froze halfway to her lips. Michael stopped mid-chew. Diana's phone slipped from her fingers. "Thank you, James," I replied calmly. "Please let them know everything will proceed as planned." Mom's face went through a fascinating series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally, dawning horror as understanding set in. "Alex," she whispered. "What is he talking about?" I stood, straightening my jacket. "Everyone, I believe some introductions are in order. I'm Alexander Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Security Solutions, and, as of Monday, Chief Executive of the merged security divisions of Meridian Technologies and MSS. The turkey wasn't the only thing that got roasted that afternoon, but the real fireworks were just beginning. You could have heard a pin drop in the dining room. 24 faces stared at me in various states of shock, disbelief, and, in the case of my mother's colleagues, dawning recognition. That's impossible," Michael finally sputtered. "Your company is just a small startup. A small startup that just acquired controlling interest in Meridian's security division," Dr. Anderson corrected smoothly. "Though acquired might not be the right word. Rescued might be more accurate, given the state of their current security infrastructure." Mom's face had gone from red to white. As SVP of Operations, she knew exactly how desperate Meridian's security situation had been, and now she was realizing that her disappointment of a son had been their salvation. "The garage company," Diana whispered, her legal mind putting pieces together. "All those years, it wasn't failing. You were building the most advanced AI-driven security system in the industry. I finished for her." "Yes. Though I have to thank you all. Your constant criticism made it much easier to operate in stealth mode." One of Mom's colleagues, Brad from finance, cleared his throat. Mrs. Mitchell, you never mentioned your son was the founder of MSS. She didn't know, I said quietly. None of them did. They were too busy being embarrassed by my little startup to actually ask what I was building. Dad, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally found his voice. The valuation, the merger terms. $8 billion, Dr. Anderson supplied helpfully. Though that's just the initial valuation. Once we announced the new security contracts next quarter. The sound Mom made was somewhere between a gasp and a whimper. She'd spent 20 years climbing Meridian's corporate ladder, and her youngest son had just become her boss. If you'll excuse me, I stood, straightening my tie. Dr. Anderson and I have some details to finalize before Monday's announcement. Mom, thanks for dinner. Though I suspect future family gatherings will be different. As I turned to leave, Michael jumped up. Wait, all those times I offered you a job at Goldman were deeply appreciated, I smiled. In fact, Goldman is one of our biggest clients. Your boss reports to my board next week about their security upgrade needs. Jessica, Michael's wife, actually snorted into her wine glass. She'd always been the only one who bothered to ask about my work with genuine interest. The next few days were chaos. News of the merger leaked, and suddenly the reclusive tech genius behind Mitchell Security Solutions was front-page news. My face was splashed across business magazines, my overnight success story, dissected by talking heads who had no idea it was built on years of careful planning. Monday morning, I walked into Meridian's headquarters for the official announcement. The security guard did a double-take. He was used to waving me through as Mrs. Mitchell's son when I visited Mom for lunch. Now he was scrambling to find my new executive access badge. The boardroom was packed. Mom sat rigid in her SVP chair, looking like she'd aged 10 years over the weekend. The other executives were a mix of nervous and curious. They'd all heard rumors about my management style. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, let's talk about the future of corporate security. For the next hour, I laid out my vision. The integration of AI with physical security, the predictive threat analysis system, the contracts we'd already secured with major global corporations. With each revelation, I could see my mother's colleagues realizing just how badly they'd underestimated me. And finally, I concluded, let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, my mother is SVP of Operations. No, this won't affect her position. I paused for effect. Her performance review will be handled by the board, just like any other executive. The relief on Mom's face lasted exactly 3 seconds before she realized what that meant. She'd have to prove her worth just like everyone else, without family connections to fall back on. After the meeting, she tried to catch me alone. Alex, honey, we should talk. Of course, I replied professionally. Have your assistant contact mine for a meeting. I'm pretty booked this week, but we should be able to find time next Tuesday. Her face crumpled slightly. I'm your mother. And I'm your CEO, I said quietly. We'll need to figure out how to navigate that professionally. Just like you always wanted me to learn about the corporate world, remember? The next few weeks were a masterclass in family dynamics under corporate pressure. Michael suddenly discovered a burning interest in cybersecurity, sending me lengthy emails about potential synergies between our companies. Diana's law firm mysteriously ended up pitching for our legal work. They weren't successful. Dad tried to play peacemaker, inviting me to his country club to talk things over. I accepted, arriving in my new Porsche, enjoying the way his golf buddies' heads turned. You could have told us, he said over drinks. Would you have believed me? I asked. Or would you have tried to take over, push me into doing things your way, just like always? He had no answer for that. The real change came during the first quarter earnings call. Our integrated security system had exceeded all projections, driving Meridian's stock to record highs. Mom sat in on the call, watching as I fielded questions from analysts who used to ignore her, now hanging on my every word. Mr. Mitchell, one analyst asked, your mother has been with Meridian for 20 years. How does it feel to be her boss? I smiled, looking directly at Mom. Success in business isn't about family connections or following traditional paths. It's about innovation, vision, and the courage to build something new. I learned that by watching my mother's career, even if we disagreed about how to apply those lessons. She cried later in her office. I pretended not to notice when I passed by. Christmas that year was interesting. Gone were the snide comments about my career choices, replaced by awkward attempts to show they'd supported me all along. I always knew you had potential, Michael claimed, conveniently forgetting years of condescension. Remember when I helped you with your first business plan? Diane added, apparently forgetting she'd refused to even read it. Mom had prepared my favorite dishes, a transparent attempt at reconciliation. But as we sat around the table, the power dynamics had shifted irrevocably. I got you something, I said, handing Mom a small package. Inside was a framed copy of my first business plan, the one I'd written in that garage they'd been so ashamed of. Attached was a note. Thanks for teaching me that success comes in many forms, even if you didn't mean to. 5 years have passed since that Thanksgiving revelation. Meridian's security division, under my leadership, has become the industry standard. Michael's firm now pays us handsomely for their security needs, and Diana's law firm regularly loses bids to our preferred counsel. Mom still works at Meridian, though she's no longer SCVP. She took a different role, heading up our corporate training division. Turns out she's excellent at teaching others about corporate structure, even as she struggled to see beyond it herself. Last month, Northwestern Business School invited me to give the commencement speech. As I stood at the podium, I could see my family in the audience, their expressions so different from those dismissive looks of years past. Success isn't always about climbing the ladder someone else built, I told the graduates. Sometimes it's about building your own ladder, even if others can't see where it leads. And sometimes the best revenge isn't proving others wrong. It's proving yourself right in ways they never imagined possible. After the ceremony, Mom hugged me tightly. I'm sorry, she whispered. We were so focused on our version of success, we couldn't see you were creating something better. It's okay, I replied. Though I hope you've learned to ask about people's garages. You never know what they're building in there. Dad shook my hand, pride finally reaching his eyes. You showed us all, he said simply. Yes, I did. But the real victory wasn't in proving them wrong. It was in building something that made their version of success look small by comparison. These days, when people talk about the Mitchell family, they don't mention Michael's banking career or Diana's law partnership. They talk about the youngest son who revolutionized corporate security, who built an empire from a garage, while his family was too busy judging to notice. And Mom? She finally stopped introducing me as her son who was finding himself. Now she just says, "This is Alex, my son, and my boss." The pride in her voice is real now, earned rather than expected. Sometimes the best success story isn't about following the path others set for you. It's about blazing your own trail and letting them catch up when they finally see where it leads. Last week, I bought my parents' house. the one where that fateful Thanksgiving dinner took place. Not to live in, but to convert into Mitchell Securities' new innovation center. The garage where I started will become our AI research lab. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't just success. It's turning the place they doubted you into the foundation of an empire they never saw coming. And that's a success story even my family had to admit they never saw coming.
I adjusted the hem of my black cocktail dress, smoothing out invisible wrinkles as I stood in the corner of the grand ballroom at the Westbrook Hotel. All around me, executives from Harrison and Price International mingled, their laughter echoing off marble floors and crystal chandeliers. 20 years I'd attended this annual company gala, but tonight was different. Tonight, I wasn't just Olivia Barrett, executive assistant to CEO Alexander Price. Tonight, I was the woman who owned their future. They just didn't know it yet. Olivia. Alexander's voice boomed across the room. Come here, darling. Tell everyone your little story. I turned slowly, maintaining the same pleasant, unassuming smile I perfected over 2 decades of managing his calendar, his meetings, and his secrets. Alexander stood with a group of board members, his face flushed from too much expensive scotch. She's been with the company forever, he announced as I approached. Started as a temp, right, Olivia? 23 years ago, I confirmed quietly. And now look at her, he gestured expansively. Executive assistant to the CEO. It's like a fairy tale. The group chuckled indulgently. I noticed Richard Cooper, our CFO, checking his watch. He'd never approved of Alexander's tendency to parade me around at company events like some sort of success story mascot. Tell them about your investment, Alexander prodded, his voice carrying just a bit too far. The one that made you a millionaire. Ah, there it was. The real reason he called me over. 3 months ago, I'd purchased a vacation home in the Hamptons. The news had spread through the office like wildfire. Everyone wanted to know how a secretary, even an executive secretary, could afford such a purchase. Just lucky timing in the market, I said modestly. Lucky. Alexander laughed. See, she's just a secretary who got lucky. Probably read some hot tip in one of those women's magazines. More laughter. Even Richard Cooper cracked a smile. What's important, Alexander continued, clapping a hand on my shoulder, is that she knows her place. Don't you, Olivia? I met his eyes steadily. I always have, Alexander. He missed the edge in my voice, but I saw Richard Cooper's smile fade slightly. He was sharper than the others, always have been. Maybe that's why he'd been the only one to notice when I'd started buying company shares 7 years ago. Small amounts at first, nothing to raise alarms. A few hundred shares here, 1,000 there. Always through different brokers, different accounts. I'd learned about hiding paper trails from the best. I'd been covering Alexander's tracks for years after all. Another drink, Olivia? Alexander offered, already turning away, dismissing me from his little court. No, thank you, I replied. I should check on the catering. He waved me off, already launching into another story. I retreated to my corner, pulling out my phone. A message from my broker glowed on the screen. Final transfer complete. Congratulations, Ms. Barrett. You now own 51% of Harrison and Price International. I allowed myself a small smile. 7 years of careful planning. 7 years of reinvesting every penny, leveraging every bit of market intelligence I'd gleaned from typing Alexander's emails, sitting in on his calls, organizing his meetings. The same access he'd taken for granted had given me everything I needed to build my position. Quite a party, a quiet voice said beside me. I turned to find Margaret Wells, our head of legal, studying me with curious eyes. You seem deep in thought. Just tired, I replied. It's been a long week. She nodded slowly. I imagine it has. Especially with the Peterson merger falling apart. I kept my face carefully neutral. The Peterson deal had been Alexander's pet project for months. What no one knew was that I'd been the one to quietly tip off Peterson's board about Alexander's plans to strip their assets and lay off their entire research division. These things happen, I said mildly. Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly. She'd always been too perceptive for her own good. You know, Olivia, I've been reviewing some interesting trading patterns lately. Large blocks of shares being bought through various shells and holding companies. Very sophisticated stuff. I met her gaze calmly. Sounds fascinating. It is, she agreed. almost as fascinating as how a secretary managed to buy a $3 million beach house. Before I could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew our attention. Janet Chin, head of our Asian operations, was arriving late, and she wasn't alone. With her was Marcus Peterson himself, CEO of Peterson Technologies. Alexander's face went pale. He started pushing through the crowd toward them. But Marcus held up a hand. "Don't bother, Alexander," he called out, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet ballroom. "I'm not here to talk to you. I'm here to meet the person who really controls Harrison and Price now." Every head in the room turned, looking for some unknown power player. I felt Margaret stiffen beside me as realization dawned in her eyes. "It's you, isn't it?" she whispered. I handed her my empty champagne glass. "Excuse me," I said softly. "I believe I have a meeting to attend." As I walked across that ballroom floor, 2 decades of being underestimated, overlooked, and condescended to fell away with each step. The whispers started as people began to understand what was happening. By the time I reached Marcus Peterson, Alexander's face had moved past pale and straight into gray. "Ms. Barrett," Marcus said warmly, extending his hand. "Thank you for warning us about the hostile takeover attempt. I believe we have much to discuss about a more equitable merger arrangement." "My pleasure," I replied, shaking his hand. "Shall we use the private dining room?" I had it prepared just in case. Alexander found his voice then. What is this? Olivia, what are you doing?" I turned to face him, dropping the deferential mask I'd worn for so long. "Taking my place, Alexander, just like you always said I should." The room erupted in chaos. Board members pulled out phones, frantically calling lawyers and brokers. Richard Cooper slumped against the bar, looking like he might be sick. And Alexander just stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. In a way, he was. Margaret appeared at my elbow, her legal mind already racing ahead. "The quarterly board meeting is next week," she said quietly. "I assume you'll want to make some changes to the voting structure." I nodded. "Among other things, I think it's time Harrison and Price had some fresh perspectives in leadership." And Alexander. I glanced at my longtime boss, still frozen in shock. "I believe he's overdue for retirement. Don't worry, I'll write him a lovely recommendation letter. After all, I've been writing all his other correspondence for years." Marcus Peterson chuckled beside me. "Shall we discuss that merger?" "Of course," I said, gesturing toward the private dining room. "After you." As we walked away, I heard Alexander's voice, small and confused. But she's just a secretary." I paused at the dining room door, looking back at him one last time. "No, Alexander, I was never just a secretary. You just never bothered to look past the title." The door closed behind us with a soft click, leaving the chaos of the ballroom behind. 23 years of playing the perfect assistant, and in one night, everything had changed. Well, not everything. I still had to order the catering for next week's board meeting, but this time, I'd be sitting at the head of the table. As I took my seat across from Marcus Peterson, I pulled out my phone and sent one final message to my broker: "Begin phase 2. The real work was just beginning. After all, I hadn't spent 7 years building my position just to maintain the status quo. Harrison and Price was about to undergo some major changes. And this time, I wouldn't be taking the minutes. I'd be calling the shots. The morning after the gala, I arrived at Harrison and Price's headquarters at exactly 7:00 a.m., just as I had for the past 23 years. The security guard did a double take when I stepped out of a chauffeur-driven Mercedes instead of my usual modest sedan. "Morning, Miss Barrett," he stammered, quickly opening the door. Ma'am, Olivia is still fine, George," I said kindly. After all, he'd been the one who'd always saved me a parking spot close to the building on late nights when I was the last to leave, long after Alexander had gone home. The lobby was already buzzing with nervous energy. News travels fast in corporate America, and the events of last night's gala had spread like wildfire. Junior executives huddled in corners, whispering behind coffee cups. Administrative assistants traded wide-eyed looks as I passed. I walked to the executive elevator, the one I'd never been allowed to use despite managing the access list for 2 decades. As the doors closed, I caught my reflection in the polished steel. Same elegant blazer and pencil skirt I always wore, but today they were Channel instead of department store brands. Small changes, just enough to signal that the rules had shifted. Alexander's office, my office now, was dark when I arrived. His secretary Janet's desk was empty too. On any other Monday, I'd be at my old desk outside, preparing his schedule, screening his calls, making his coffee just the way he liked it. Instead, I used my key, the one he never knew I had, to unlock his door. The room still smelled of his cologne and stale cigar smoke. I walked to his desk, running my fingers along the polished mahogany. How many times had I stood here, taking notes while he held court? My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus Peterson, Wall Street Journal, running the story in 30 minutes. Ready? I smiled, settling into the leather chair. Ready. At 7:45 a.m., exactly 15 minutes before the markets opened, the story broke. Breaking. Harrison and Price International undergoes shocking leadership change. Secret majority shareholder revealed as CEO's former secretary. My phone exploded with notifications. First came the panic texts from board members, then emails from shareholders, then calls from every major news outlet in the country. At 8 a.m. sharp, Alexander burst into the office, face red with rage. He stopped short when he saw me in his chair. "Get out," he snarled. "This is my office." I didn't move. "Actually, Alexander, this is the CEO's office, and according to the bylaws you never bothered to read carefully, the majority shareholder has the right to appoint the CEO. Would you like to see the paperwork?" "This is impossible," he spluttered. "You're nothing but a—" "Choose your next words very carefully," I cut in, my voice silk over steel. "They might be your last ones as an employee of this company." He deflated slightly, sinking into one of the visitor chairs, the same ones I'd selected years ago when we renovated the office. "How?" he whispered. "How did you do this?" I leaned forward, folding my hands on the desk. "Do you remember the Miller acquisition in 2016? He frowned. "Of course. One of our biggest deals." "Do you remember who found the discrepancy in their financials? The one that let us negotiate the price down by 40%? "I did," he said automatically. I raised an eyebrow. "No, Alexander. I did. Just like I found the hidden value in their Asian subsidiaries that tripled our return on investment. Just like I spotted the patent infringement in their European operations that you used to pressure their board." Understanding began to dawn in his eyes. "For 23 years, I continued, I've watched you take credit for other people's work. I've covered up your mistakes, fixed your errors, and made you look brilliant. And every step of the way, I was learning. About business, about strategy, about power." "But the shares," he started. "Remember all those insider trading investigations you barely escaped? The ones where the evidence mysteriously disappeared? Well, let's just say I learned a lot about hiding paper trails." A knock at the door interrupted us. Margaret Wells entered, carrying a thick folder. "The board is assembling for an emergency meeting," she announced, "and the SEC would like to verify the share transfers." "Everything's in order," I assured her, standing up. Alexander was just leaving, for good. He stood shakily. "You can't do this. I built this company." "No," I corrected him. "You inherited this company from your father, and then you nearly ran it into the ground with your ego and short-sighted leadership. Now you can either leave quietly with a generous severance package, or I can have security escort you out while I read aloud from the file I keep on your creative accounting practices." The fight went out of him all at once. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the office that had been his entire identity for so long. I looked at Margaret. "Shall we?" She nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "The board is waiting, and they're terrified." "Good," I said, gathering my tablet. "They should be." The boardroom fell silent as I entered. 12 men and 1 woman, all wearing expressions ranging from shock to outrage to fear. Richard Cooper, our CFO, looked like he hadn't slept. "Good morning," I said pleasantly, taking my seat at the head of the table. "I believe we have some matters to discuss." "This is the regular." Thomas Wellington, our longest-serving board member, sputtered. "You can't just—" "I can and I have." I cut him off. "Now we can waste time arguing about it, or we can discuss the Peterson merger and our new direction for the Asian markets. Your choice." Richard Cooper cleared his throat. "I've reviewed the share transfers. They're legitimate. Ms. Barrett has been accumulating her position for years, all through legal channels." "Thank you, Richard," I said. Now let's talk about the future. I've prepared a detailed presentation on our 5-year strategy. I pulled up the first slide, a comprehensive analysis of our market position that I'd spent years developing while sitting quietly in the corner of these same board meetings, officially just there to take notes. For the next 2 hours, I laid out my vision: expansion into emerging markets, investment in sustainable technologies, a complete overhaul of our corporate culture. By the time I finished, even Thomas Wellington had stopped protesting and started taking notes. One more thing, I said as the meeting wound down. Effective immediately, we're implementing a company-wide policy review. Pay equity, promotion practices, harassment policies. Everything. Margaret will be heading up the task force. That could be expensive, Richard cautioned. So is losing talent because we're stuck in the 1950s, I countered. Speaking of which, Janet Anderson from the mailroom has a master's in supply chain management. Promote her to operations immediately, and find out who else we've been overlooking. As the board filed out, Margaret stayed behind. The Wall Street Journal wants an interview, she said, and Forbes is already talking about featuring you in their next issue. I shook my head. First things first, get me the personnel files for every administrative assistant, secretary, and support staff member in the company. I want to know who else has been hiding their light under a bushel. She smiled. Already done. There's a data analyst in accounting who's been working as a clerk for 3 years. PhD from MIT, and a former management consultant working in reception because she needed flexible hours for her kids. Promote them both, I said. And Margaret? Thank you for keeping my secret all these months. She shrugged. I knew something was coming when I traced those share purchases. I just didn't know what. Besides, it's about time someone shook up the boys' club. By the end of the week, Harrison and Price was transformed. Alexander's old guard was gone, replaced by a diverse team of leaders chosen for talent rather than connections. The Peterson merger was proceeding smoothly, with both companies' stock prices soaring. And me? I kept my old assistant's desk outside the CEO's office. Not to work at it, but as a reminder. Every morning when I walked past it, I thought about all the other just secretaries out there, watching and waiting for their moment. The following Monday, I called my first all-company meeting. Standing at the podium, looking out at thousands of faces, I thought about that night at the gala when Alexander had told me to know my place. For too long, I began, this company has wasted its most valuable resource, its people. We've overlooked talent because it didn't come in the package we expected. We've dismissed wisdom because it came from the wrong desk. That ends today. I paused, making eye contact with Janet from the mailroom, now wearing a crisp suit in her role as operations director. From now on, there is no just anything at Harrison and Price. No just secretaries. No just clerks. No just assistants. There are only people, talented, ambitious, worthy people. And if anyone tells you to know your place, remember this. Your place is wherever your talent and hard work can take you. The applause was deafening. Later that evening, as I prepared to leave the office, I found a gift on my desk. It was my old nameplate from when I was Alexander's secretary, but someone had modified it. Under my name, in elegant script, were the words, "Never just anything." I placed it on my desk, right next to my CEO nameplate, a reminder that power doesn't always look like we expect it to. Sometimes it looks like a quiet woman sitting in a corner, taking notes, watching, waiting, and building an empire in silence. The next morning, the Wall Street Journal ran another story. Harrison and Price stock hits all-time high under new leadership. Below the headline was a photo of me at my old assistant's desk, now displayed prominently in my office. The caption read, "Olivia Barrett, CEO, from taking notes to taking control." I smiled, remembering Alexander's words from the gala. Yes, I had gotten lucky. But luck had nothing to do with what came next. That was all strategy, patience, and the power of being underestimated. After all, I wasn't just a secretary who got lucky. I was a CEO who got smart. And this was only the beginning. The email arrived at 9:03 a.m. on a Tuesday. Please join me in welcoming James Anderson to the engineering team. He'll be shadowing you for the next 2 weeks to learn our systems. I stared at my screen, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. After 12 years at Quantum Dynamics, I knew what shadowing really meant. They were replacing me with someone younger, probably cheaper, and I was expected to teach him everything I knew before they showed me the door. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I developed the core technology that turned quantum dynamics from a struggling startup into a $400 million company. Not that anyone in the current management knew that. The people who had been there at the beginning, who knew the truth about Qdia Secure, our flagship security software, were long gone. Victoria Kane, our new CEO, who had arrived 6 months ago full of fresh perspectives and strategic realignment plans, stood in my office doorway with a plastic smile. Behind her was James Anderson, looking uncomfortable in his crisp new shirt and trying too hard to seem confident. Sarah, Victoria's voice dripped with false warmth. James here is a brilliant graduate from Stanford. Top of his class. I know you'll show him everything he needs to know about our systems. Everything he needs to know. I almost laughed. The core architecture of Qdia Secure had taken me 3 years to develop, working nights and weekends in my tiny apartment, fueled by coffee and determination. The patent application I filed under my own name, before quantum dynamics even existed, was buried in a drawer at home, a security measure I'd taken when I first sensed the company's culture changing. Of course, I replied, gesturing to the empty chair beside my desk. Happy to help. Victoria's smile tightened slightly. We both knew this wasn't a request. In tech, when they ask you to train your replacement, refusing is career suicide. Not that my career at Quantum Dynamics had much life left anyway. James settled into the chair, tablet ready, eager to learn. He wasn't a bad kid, really, just ambitious, probably told he was getting a great opportunity to learn from a senior team member before taking over the position. I doubted they told him he was here to replace someone who had been with the company since it was 6 people working out of a converted warehouse. Let's start with the basics, I said, pulling up the system architecture diagrams. Qdia Secure operates on a proprietary encryption protocol. As I walked in through the surface-level functionality, my mind drifted back to 2011, when I first developed the encryption algorithm that would become Qdia Secure's foundation. I was 28, working as a security consultant, and had stumbled upon a way to dramatically improve encryption speeds without compromising security. Michael Torres, Quantum Dynamics' original founder, had seen the potential immediately. This could revolutionize enterprise security, he'd said, offering me not just a job but a partnership. We'll build the company around your technology. The patent had been filed and approved before I joined Quantum Dynamics. A deliberate choice on my part. I'd seen too many developers lose control of their innovations to corporate ownership. Michael had understood and agreed to a licensing arrangement that gave the company exclusive rights to use my technology while I retained ownership. That agreement, tucked away in the company's original incorporation documents, had survived 3 CEOs, 2 acquisitions, and a dozen reorganizations. Not that anyone had bothered to read those old files. They were too busy disrupting and innovating to care about history. Sorry, James interrupted my thoughts. Could you explain again how the primary key generation works? I smiled. That's actually proprietary information. Let's focus on the user-facing features first. Victoria appeared again around lunch, hovering like an expensive perfumed cloud. How's the training going? Great, James replied enthusiastically. Sarah knows this system inside and out. Yes, Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. After so many years, I would hope so. Though sometimes fresh perspectives are what we need to move forward. The message wasn't subtle. I was outdated, resistant to change, probably too expensive. Never mind that Qdia Secure's core technology was my creation, that every major improvement had come from my work, that our biggest clients stayed because they trusted my expertise. Over the next week, I taught James what I could, the public-facing features, the basic maintenance procedures, the customer support protocols. But the heart of the system, the proprietary encryption engine that made everything work, that I kept to myself, not out of spite, but out of principle, some things you earn through years of work, not 2 weeks of shadowing. Victoria called me into her office on Thursday afternoon. The HR director, Paul, sat stiffly in one corner, trying to look invisible. Sarah, Victoria began, shuffling papers on her desk. As part of our ongoing reorganization, we're making some changes to the engineering department. I kept my face neutral. Here it comes. Your contributions have been valuable, but we're moving in a new direction. More agile, more innovative. We need people who can adapt to rapid change. The irony of being called inflexible by someone who didn't understand the technology that paid her salary was almost amusing. We're offering a generous severance package, Paul chimed in, sliding a folder across the desk. 2 months' pay, health coverage through the end of the quarter. I opened the folder, skimming the agreement. Standard corporate language about confidentiality, non-competition, surrendering all rights to intellectual property developed during employment. When would this be effective? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Today will be your last day, Victoria said, not even trying to sound apologetic. James has picked things up quickly, and we need to move forward with our new initiatives. I closed the folder without signing. I'll need to review this with my lawyer. Victoria's smile faltered slightly. The severance is contingent on signing today. Then I'll have to decline. I stood up, straightening my jacket. I'll clean out my desk. Sarah, Victoria called as I reached the door. I know change is hard, but this is business. No need to be difficult about it. I turned back, meeting her gaze. You're right. It is business. Walking back to my desk, I felt lighter than I had in months. James looked up as I started packing my things into a box. Are you leaving? He asked, genuine concern in his voice. Yes. Apparently, I'm not agile enough for the new direction. But I've barely learned anything about how the core system works. I paused, a framed photo of the original quantum dynamics team in my hands. Some things take more than 2 weeks to learn, James. Good luck. Victoria washed from her office as I walked out, probably congratulating herself on executing another successful strategic realignment. She had no idea what was coming. At home, I pulled out the patent documentation, the original licensing agreement, and 12 years of system documentation. Everything that proved I wasn't just another replaceable cog in their corporate machine. I called Michael Torres, who had retired to Arizona 3 years ago. They finally did it, huh? He said when I told him what happened. Yep. New CEO, new direction, same old story. They have no idea about the patent. Apparently not. Victoria Kane seems to think everything belongs to the company. Michael's laugh was bitter. You were smart to keep the patent separate. What are you going to do? I looked at the carefully preserved documents spread across my desk. I'm going to remind them that innovation isn't just about moving forward. Sometimes it's about remembering how you got there in the first place. Need any help? Michael asked. I still know some people on the board. Not yet, I said, already drafting an email to my lawyer. Let's see how they handle the first surprise. That night, I sat at my computer, looking at the administration console for QD Secure's licensing system. A small piece of code, hidden in the original implementation that only I knew about. In 3 days, when the monthly license validation check ran, they would discover exactly who owned the technology they took for granted. Victoria Kane thought she was making a smart business decision, streamlining operations by removing expensive legacy employees. She was about to learn that some legacies are worth keeping. I hit a few keys, implementing changes that would take effect when the system next checked its licensing status. Then I went to bed, sleeping better than I had in months. The reckoning was coming, and I had front-row seats to watch it unfold. 3 days after my dismissal, at exactly 3:00 a.m. Eastern Time, QD Secure's monthly license validation check ran automatically. Within seconds, error messages began flooding the system. By 3:01 a.m., every instance of QD Secure running on client servers worldwide displayed the same message. License verification failed. Patent holder validation required. I was awake, sitting at my home office desk with a cup of coffee, watching it all unfold through the monitoring system I had quietly maintained. Victoria Kane's phone would start ringing any minute now. The first call came at 3:07 a.m. from Goldman Financial, one of Quantum Dynamics' biggest clients. Their entire trading security infrastructure had gone into safe mode, halting all transactions. By 3:15 a.m., 14 more major clients had reported complete system shutdowns. My phone buzzed. A text from James Anderson. Everything's crashed. No one knows what's happening. Help? I set my phone aside without responding. Poor James was about to learn a valuable lesson about corporate politics and intellectual property rights. At 3:30 a.m., my email pinged with an urgent message from Victoria. Sarah, there seems to be some sort of system malfunction. We need you to come in immediately to assist with recovery. We'll pay emergency consulting rates. I smiled at her attempt to sound professional while her company was imploding. My response was brief. I'm afraid I'm not available for consulting at this time. However, you might want to review the original patent and licensing documentation for QDS Secure. Pay particular attention to patent US 8,429,671B, filed under my name in 2011. By 4:00 a.m., Quantum Dynamics' legal team had discovered what Victoria should have known before firing me. I owned the core technology. The licensing agreement gave me the right to revoke access if the company breached certain conditions, including maintaining the original developer's involvement in the system's operation. My phone rang again. Victoria's number. I let it go to voicemail. Sarah, this is completely unprofessional. Her voice was tight with barely controlled panic. You can't just shut down our entire system. Call me immediately. I drafted a quick email to my lawyer instead, copying Victoria. As the legal owner of patent US 8,429,671B and pursuant to Section 7.3 of the original licensing agreement with Quantum Dynamics, attached, I am exercising my right to suspend the company's access to my intellectual property following their breach of our ongoing operational agreement. I am happy to discuss reinstatement terms with authorized representatives. The sun was rising when my doorbell rang. I checked the security camera to see Victoria herself standing on my porch, looking considerably less polished than usual and hastily thrown on clothes. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. This is sabotage, she said without preamble. We'll sue you for damages. Actually, I replied calmly, it's asset protection. And before you waste money on lawyers, you might want to check with your board of directors. I believe they're already meeting to discuss this situation. Her face paled. The board? Yes. Apparently, several major shareholders are concerned about how a key piece of intellectual property was mishandled. Did you know that QDS Secure generates 60% of Quantum Dynamics revenue? She hadn't known. I could see it in her eyes. What do you want? She asked, her voice softer now. I don't want anything. The board of directors, however, might have some questions about why you fired the patent holder of your core technology without due diligence. As if on cue, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face went even whiter. Emergency board meeting in 30 minutes, she whispered. You should probably get to that, I suggested. And Victoria, thanks for your service. She flinched at hearing her own dismissive words thrown back at her. After she left, I received a call from Herbert Matthews, the board chairman. Ms. Mitchell, his voice was grave. We've just reviewed the patent and licensing documentation. Why didn't you mention this during your termination? Would it have mattered? I asked. Victoria Kane was brought in to modernize the company. Apparently, that meant discarding anything she didn't understand. The board has called an emergency session, he said. We would appreciate your attendance. I agreed to video conference in. No need to leave my comfortable home office for their corporate crisis. At 9:00 a.m., I connected to the board meeting. Victoria sat at one end of the table, looking like she hadn't slept. James Anderson was there too, probably to explain why he couldn't get the system working again. Ms. Mitchell, Herbert began, we find ourselves in an unprecedented situation. 17 major clients have threatened to cancel their contracts if service isn't restored immediately. Our stock price is already dropping in pre-market trading. That sounds serious, I observed mildly. Sarah, please, Victoria interrupted. Just tell us how to restart the system. I leaned back in my chair, letting the moment stretch out. The system doesn't need to be restarted, I explained. It needs to be properly licensed. As the patent holder, I'm happy to discuss new terms. Terms? Victoria's voice rose. We own the system. No, Herbert corrected her sharply. We have a licensing agreement that you apparently didn't bother to review before terminating its key stakeholder. James raised his hand tentatively. I've been trying to understand the core encryption engine, but there are parts that aren't documented anywhere in our codebase. That's because those parts are proprietary, I explained. They belong to me, not Quantum Dynamics. What you have is a licensed implementation. Victoria started to speak, but Herbert cut her off. Ms. Mitchell, what would it take to resolve this situation? I opened a document on my screen and began sharing it with the meeting. I've prepared a new licensing agreement, I said. The terms are simple. I retain patent ownership and return to Quantum Dynamics as Chief Technology Officer, with full autonomy over the technical direction of QDS Secure and any derived products. Additionally, I want a complete review of recent terminations in the engineering department. Good people were lost due to age discrimination and false claims of obsolescence. The board members exchanged glances. Herbert leaned forward. And if we agree to these terms, then I can have the system back online in about 5 minutes. Victoria stood up abruptly. This is extortion. No, Herbert's voice was ice. This is consequences. Please wait outside while the board discusses Ms. Mitchell's terms. As Victoria stormed out, I caught James trying to hide a smile. The board's deliberation took exactly 12 minutes. When they returned, Herbert spoke directly to my video feed. Your terms are accepted, Ms. Mitchell. The board has also accepted Victoria Kane's resignation, effective immediately. When can you start? I pretended to check my calendar, though I'd been prepared for this moment for days. How about now? I opened my laptop's command console and entered a series of commands. Around the world, QDS Secure systems began coming back online. James's eyes widened as he watched the monitoring dashboard turn from red to green. That's it, he asked. Just like that. Just like that, I confirmed. Sometimes the most powerful code is the simplest. Speaking of which, James, I hope you're ready to learn how this system really works. This time without the 2-week deadline. Herbert cleared his throat. Ms. Mitchell, the board would appreciate a full briefing on the technical architecture when you have a moment. We want to ensure nothing like this happens again. Of course, I agreed. Though I suggest we start with a review of the company's intellectual property management policies. After all, innovation isn't just about creating new technology. It's about respecting and protecting the innovations you already have. As the meeting ended, I sat back in my chair, allowing myself a small smile. In 3 days, I had gone from discarded employee to Chief Technology Officer. But more importantly, I had reminded Quantum Dynamics that true innovation doesn't come from flashy MBAs with buzzwords. It comes from the people who build, maintain, and understand the technology that makes everything possible. My phone buzzed with a message from James. Does this mean I still have a job? Yes, I replied, but now you'll be learning from me properly, not just shadowing. Hope you're ready for some real engineering. Outside my home office window, the morning sun had fully risen. Somewhere across town, Victoria Kane was probably clearing out her office, learning her own lesson of the danger of underestimating legacy employees. But my work was just beginning. I had a company to rebuild, a culture to fix, and a new generation of engineers to mentor properly. After all, that's what real innovation looks like. 6 months into my role as CTO of Quantum Dynamics, I sat in what used to be Victoria Kane's office, reviewing the changes we'd implemented since that dramatic night when QD Secure went dark. The wall that once displayed Victoria's MBA and corporate awards now showcased something far more meaningful: patents and technical innovations from our engineering team. The company's transformation had been dramatic, but not in the way Victoria had envisioned with her strategic realignment. We hadn't become more agile by discarding experienced engineers. Instead, we've grown stronger by recognizing and nurturing talent at all levels. James Anderson, whom Victoria had hired to replace me, had turned out to be an excellent engineer once freed from corporate politics. He now led our development team, having learned the true complexities of QD Secure's architecture. More importantly, he'd learned the value of respecting experience over buzzwords. Sarah? He appeared in my doorway, tablet in hand. You're going to want to see this. He handed me the tablet, displaying a news article. Former Quantum Dynamics CEO Victoria Kane's new venture files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. I skimmed the article, noting how her attempt to launch a competing security software company had failed spectacularly. Apparently, investors had been skeptical of a CEO who had managed to lose control of her previous company's core technology. Karma's interesting, isn't it? James commented. It is, I agreed, handing back the tablet. Though I prefer to focus on what we're building rather than others' failures, how's the new encryption protocol coming along? His face lit up. Actually, that's the other thing I wanted to show you. The team's made a breakthrough. I followed him to the engineering floor, which looked vastly different from 6 months ago. Gone were the sterile cubicles Victoria had insisted on. Instead, we had collaborative spaces, testing labs, and walls covered in whiteboards filled with complex algorithms. More importantly, the demographics had changed. After reviewing the terminations under Victoria's tenure, we discovered a clear pattern of age discrimination. Many experienced engineers had been pushed out under the guise of modernization. One of my first acts as CTO had been to reach out to those who had been unfairly terminated. Many had returned, bringing with them decades of valuable experience. Now our teams were truly diverse, with seasoned veterans working alongside fresh graduates, each learning from the other. Maria Chen, one of the legacy engineers Victoria had pushed into early retirement, was now leading our research division. At 62, she had more patents to her name than most Silicon Valley startups. The new hybrid encryption model is showing remarkable results, she explained, pulling up test data. By combining your original algorithm with the quantum-resistant approach David suggested, we've increased processing speed by 340% while maintaining security integrity. David, a recent graduate who would have been considered too inexperienced for such responsibility under the old regime, beamed with pride. This was how real innovation happened, through collaboration, not competition. The quarterly board meeting the following week highlighted just how much had changed. Instead of PowerPoint presentations full of business jargon, we had live demonstrations of technical achievements. The board members, who had once glazed over during technical discussions, were now actively engaged. Ms. Mitchell, Herbert Matthews began, the numbers speak for themselves. Revenue is up 85% year over year. Client retention is at 98%. And our market share in the security sector has increased by 23%. I nodded, but directed attention to a different slide. More importantly, look at our innovation metrics. Patent filings are up 150%. Our engineering retention rate is now 94%, compared to 40% under previous management. And our technical support satisfaction scores are the highest in the industry, all while maintaining the highest average employee age in the sector. Maria added proudly, "Experience matters." The board's support had been crucial in implementing these changes. After the tedious Secure shutdown incident, they'd learned their lesson about valuing technical expertise over management ads. One afternoon, I received an unexpected email from Michael Torres, the original founder who had first recognized the potential of my encryption algorithm. Saw the latest industry rankings, he wrote. Quantum dynamics is being hailed as a model of sustainable innovation. Want to grab coffee? I'm in town next week. We met at the same small cafe where, 12 years ago, we had first discussed building a company around my technology. Michael looked older but energized. You've done something remarkable, he said, stirring his coffee. Not just saving the company, but transforming it. Victoria Kane wanted to modernize through destruction. You've modernized through evolution. We had good foundations, I replied. Sometimes innovation isn't about tearing everything down and starting over. It's about building on what works while being open to new ideas. He smiled. That's why I made sure the patent stayed in your name. I knew someday the company would need reminding of what really matters in tech, the people who create and understand the technology. The conversation shifted to the future. Michael had been watching our progress and had ideas about potential new directions for the company. Not as a manager, but as a technical advisor, exactly the kind of experienced voice Victoria had tried to silence. Back at the office, I found James and the team celebrating. The new encryption protocol had passed its final tests and was ready for deployment. We couldn't have done this without everyone, James announced. The combined experience in this room made something none of us could have created alone. Looking around at the faces, young and old, new hires and veterans, I felt a deep satisfaction. This was what real innovation looked like: collaborative, respectful, and built on a foundation of shared knowledge. That evening, as I prepared to leave, I found a small package on my desk. Inside was a framed copy of my original patent, along with a note from the board. Thank you for reminding us that true value isn't about titles or trends. It's about recognizing and protecting the innovations and innovators that make progress possible. I hung it on the wall next to the team photos and technical awards. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful response to being undervalued isn't revenge, it's showing everyone exactly what real value looks like. 1 year to the day after Victoria had dismissed me as obsolete, I stood in the company auditorium, addressing our now expanded engineering department. The audience included not just our local team, but video feeds from our new development centers worldwide. A year ago, someone decided that experience was a liability and innovation meant discarding the past. I began. Today, we're ranked as the most innovative company in our sector precisely because we value both experience and new ideas. Real progress isn't about choosing between old and new, it's about bringing them together. I gestured to the screen behind me, showing our latest performance metrics. Our success isn't just measured in revenue or market share. It's measured in patents filed, problems solved, and most importantly, in the collective knowledge we're building. James, sitting in the front row, nodded in agreement. He'd grown from Victoria's unwitting replacement hire into a talented technical leader, proof that good engineers thrive when freed from toxic corporate politics. Last week, a reporter asked me what I did differently as CTO. I continued. The answer is simple. I remembered what matters in technology, not buzzwords or board presentations, but the actual innovation that solves real problems. That comes from people, all of them, regardless of age or background. After the presentation, I returned to my office to find an email from Victoria Kane. After her startup's bankruptcy, she was seeking new opportunities and wondered if we might discuss a potential role at Quantum Dynamics. I drafted a brief response. Thank you for your interest. However, we found that our best results come from valuing and retaining the talent we already have. Best of luck in your future endeavors. Then I turned back to reviewing patent applications from our engineering team. Real innovation was waiting, and it had nothing to do with corporate politics or strategic realignment. It had everything to do with respecting the people who create, understand, and improve the technology that moves us forward. Sometimes you have to shut everything down to make that point clear.
"This has to be a joke," Michael Harrison said, tossing my carefully prepared proposal onto his mahogany desk. "You want us to completely rebuild our software platform? Based on some wild theory about cloud integration." I stood in his corner office at Vertex Solutions, trying to keep my composure as 6 months of research and development was dismissed in seconds. The Seattle rain tapped against the floor-to-ceiling windows, matching my sinking mood. "It's not a theory, Michael," I explained, pulling up market research on my tablet. "Every analysis shows enterprise software is moving to the cloud. If we don't adapt—" "Listen, Alex," he cut me off, leaning back in his leather chair. "You're a good developer, but you don't understand business. Vertex has been providing on-premise solutions for 20 years. Our clients trust us because we're stable, reliable, traditional. My name is Alex Foster," and at that moment, I was watching my boss make the biggest mistake of his career, though neither of us knew it yet. "Our biggest clients are already asking about cloud options," I persisted. "IBM, Microsoft, even Oracle are all moving in this direction. We need to." "What we need," Michael interrupted again, "is for you to focus on maintaining our existing systems, not chasing trendy buzzwords." He stood up, signaling the conversation was over. As I reached for my proposal, he grabbed it first, crumpled it into a ball, and tossed it in his Trome wastebasket. "This meeting never happened," he said. "Get back to work on the Henderson account updates. That's what pays your salary." I left his office feeling numb. 3 years at Vertex, countless late nights and weekends spent coding. And this was what I had to show for it. My innovation literally in the trash. Back at my desk, I opened my development environment and stared at the code I'd been working on. Not the mundane updates Michael wanted, but my own version of what Vertex's software could become. I'd built a prototype in my spare time, proving that cloud migration wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. How'd it go? I looked up to see Samantha Wright, our lead QA engineer, perched on the edge of my desk. She was one of the few people I trusted with my ideas about modernizing our platform. About as well as you predicted, I sighed. Michael thinks cloud computing is a trend. Sam shook her head. He's going to run this company into the ground. You know, the Martinez account is already talking to Cloud Tech about switching. I did know. I'd been the one who discovered their migration plans while doing routine maintenance. It wasn't just Martinez either. Several of our biggest clients were quietly exploring cloud-based alternatives. Maybe I should have waited, I said, more to myself than Sam. Built more proof of concept. Or maybe, she lowered her voice, you should take your ideas somewhere else. Somewhere they'll be appreciated. The thought had crossed my mind. I'd even received a few recruiting emails from competing firms. But I believed in what I'd built, in what Vertex could become if only. My computer pinged with a calendar invite. Mandatory team meeting. 4 p.m. Strange. Michael never called late-day meetings unless. Layoffs, Sam whispered, seeing the notification. Third quarter numbers must be worse than we thought. She was right. At 4 p.m., we gathered in the main conference room. Michael stood at the front, flanked by HR representatives. His face had that fake sympathetic look executives practice for exactly these moments. As part of our ongoing optimization efforts, he began, we're making some strategic adjustments to our workforce. I tuned out the corporate buzzwords, already knowing where this was going. When they started calling names, mine was among the first. Please collect your personal belongings. HR will escort you out. As I packed my desk, I noticed Michael watching from his office. There was something in his expression. Not quite triumph, but satisfaction. He found a way to get rid of the irritating developer with his disruptive ideas. What he didn't know was that I'd seen this coming. For weeks, I'd been carefully backing up my personal work, documenting my ideas, ensuring that everything I'd developed independently was secured. The prototype I'd built wasn't on Vertex's servers. It lived in my private cloud account, along with all my research and designs. Sam caught me at the elevator. This is wrong, she said, hugging me quickly. They're making a huge mistake. I smiled, feeling strangely calm. Maybe not. Maybe this is exactly what needs to happen. She slipped me her personal card. Keep in touch. Something tells me you're not done disrupting things. In the parking garage, I sat in my car watching the rain fall on the windshield. 3 years of my life, dismissed with a form letter and an escort out. But as I thought about my prototype, about the future I could see so clearly while others remained blind, a plan began forming. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Wong, my old roommate from NIT, who now worked at a venture capital firm. Heard what happened. Remember that conversation we had about cloud enterprise software? Still interested. Call me. I smiled, thinking of the prototype waiting in my private repository. Michael had thrown my proposal in the trash, but he hadn't thrown away my dream. He just freed me to pursue it without constraints. That night, in my small apartment overlooking Lake Union, I opened my laptop and began writing a new proposal. Not for Vertex this time, but for myself. The first line read, Cloud Core, the future of enterprise software. My phone kept buzzing with messages from coworkers, expressions of sympathy and support. But I barely noticed them. I was too busy laying the groundwork for what would become Michael Harrison's worst nightmare. Focus on maintaining existing systems, he'd said. I planned to do much more than that. I planned to make those systems obsolete. Opening my development environment, I began coding with renewed purpose. Every line was a step away from Vertex, from Michael's short-sightedness, from the limitations others tried to place on innovation. By midnight, I had the outline of a business plan and the core architecture for what would become the most revolutionary enterprise software platform the industry had ever seen. Michael had thrown away my proposal thinking he was maintaining the status quo. Instead, he had just created his biggest competitor. And I was just getting started. 18 months after Michael Harrison threw my proposal in the trash, I stood in front of the Martinez Group's executive board, watching their faces as I demonstrated CloudCore's capabilities. The same clients who had been quietly planning to leave Vertex were now openly amazed by what they saw. This migration would take hours, not months, their CTO asked, leaning forward in his chair. Actually, I smiled, it takes 47 minutes. We ran a test simulation with your exact database structure. The room erupted in murmurs. Behind me, the screen showed CloudCore effortlessly handling processes that Vertex's legacy system struggled with for weeks. Every feature was a direct response to problems I'd watched clients battle for years. Problems Michael had insisted weren't worth solving. And the cost savings? Their CFO asked. Approximately 68% reduction in operational expenses, I replied, with guaranteed uptime of 99.99%. More murmurs. These were numbers that seemed impossible, unless you understood exactly how outdated Vertex's architecture had become. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Probably Marcus, wanting to know how the presentation was going. After that first text the night I was fired, he'd become more than just a venture capitalist. He was now CloudCore's lead investor and biggest cheerleader. That initial meeting with his firm had changed everything. Let me get this straight, Marcus had said, staring at my prototype demo. You built this while working at Vertex? And Harrison threw it away, along with 3 years of my career, I'd confirmed. Marcus had laughed, but not like Michael had. This was the laugh of someone seeing an opportunity others had missed. Their loss, he'd said, pulling out his phone. Let me make some calls. Within a week, we'd secured $5 million in seed funding. Within a month, I'd hired my first team, including Sam Wright, who'd quit Vertex the moment she saw what we were building. Their QA department is a joke anyway, she'd said, dropping her resignation letter on Michael's desk. And Alex actually understands where technology is going. Now, watching the Martinez executives marvel at CloudCore, I thought about how different this was from my last presentation at Vertex. No dismissal, no condescension, just pure appreciation for innovation done right. Mr. Foster, the CEO, spoke up. How soon can we begin implementation? I tried not to smile too broadly. We can start tomorrow. And please, call me Alex. Back at CloudCore's offices, a modern space in downtown Seattle with views that made Vertex's building look shabby, Sam was waiting with our team. Well, she asked, though my expression had already given it away. Martinez Group is in, I confirmed. Full platform migration, 3-year contract. The room erupted in cheers. On our wall of client logos, Martinez would be the biggest yet. And the third major client we'd taken from Vertex. Oh, and you're going to love this, Sam grinned, pulling up an email on her screen. Guess who just posted a job listing for Cloud Integration Specialist on their website? I leaned over to look. Sure enough, Vertex Solutions was finally, desperately trying to catch up to where I'd wanted to take them 2 years ago. A bit late, I mused, especially since we just hired the top 3 cloud architects in the region. My phone buzzed again, this time with an alert that made me pause. Vertex Solutions stock down 40% after Q3 earnings miss. Should we send Michael a thank you note? Sam joked, for giving us the push we needed to build something better. I was about to respond when our office manager stuck her head in. Alex, there's someone here to see you. Says he's from Vertex's board of directors. Interesting. I nodded. Send him in. William Chen, Vertex's lead director, looked distinctly uncomfortable in our modern office space. His suit seemed too formal, too much like the old world we'd left behind. Mr. Foster, he began, remaining standing despite my gesture toward a chair. I'll be direct. We've been watching CloudCore's growth with concern. Concern? I raised an eyebrow. Or envy? He cleared his throat. Our board believes there might be opportunities for collaboration, perhaps even a merger. I let that hang in the air for a moment, enjoying the irony. Does Michael know you're here? Mr. Harrison is not currently involved in these discussions. I pulled up our client dashboard on my screen, turning it so he could see. We've taken 47% of Vertex's market share in 18 months. By this time next year, it'll be over 80%. Why would we want to merge? Resources, he said quickly. Market presence. History. History is exactly the problem, I interrupted. Vertex is stuck in it. CloudCore is the future. And the future doesn't need to merge with the past. At least consider. I did consider it. I cut him off. About 2 years ago in Michael's office, he threw those considerations in the trash. Literally. William's face fell. He knew he was losing this battle. I'll tell you what, I continued, feeling generous. When Michael personally admits he was wrong, when he acknowledges that he dismissed innovation because he was too afraid of change, then we can talk about collaboration, but not merger. That ship has sailed. After he left, Sam poked her head in. Merger offer? First of many, I suspect. I nodded. They're finally realizing what they lost. What Michael lost, she corrected. By being too arrogant to listen. My phone buzzed with another message. Martinez Group's CEO. Contract signed. When can your team start? I smiled, thinking of Michael probably sitting in his office, watching his company's stock price fall, wondering how it had all gone wrong. Tell the team to prep for implementation, I told Sam, and maybe send a fruit basket to Michael, to thank him for throwing away the best idea he ever had. That evening, as I worked late in my office, a familiar name popped up in my email, Michael Harrison. Alex, we need to talk. What will it take to end this? I started typing, then deleted it. Then typed again. It was never about ending anything, Michael. It was about building something better. Something you were too afraid to even consider. But thanks for the motivation. Sometimes the best ideas come from the trash. I hit send, then turned back to my work. There was a platform to build, clients to help, and a future to create. Michael had taught me an invaluable lesson. Sometimes rejection is just innovation's way of finding a better path forward. And CloudCore was just getting started. 2 years to the day after Michael Harrison had thrown my proposal in his Trome wastebasket, I stood on stage at the World Technology Summit, preparing to deliver the keynote address. The irony wasn't lost on me. Vertex had never even been invited to this prestigious event, and now here I was, representing the future of enterprise software. In the front row, I could see Marcus grinning like a proud parent. CloudCore had made his venture firm more money in 2 years than they'd seen in the previous decade. Behind him sat Sam and our core team, all wearing the same expression of quiet pride. But what caught my eye was the figure trying to be inconspicuous in the back row, Michael Harrison himself, looking considerably less polished than he had in his corner office days. His appearance wasn't just unexpected, it was a sign of how completely the tables had turned. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, "2 years ago, someone told me that cloud computing was just a trend, that enterprise clients would never abandon traditional software solutions. Today, I'm here to show you how wrong that assumption was." The screens behind me lit up with CloudCore's latest metrics. 84% of the enterprise software market, 99.99% uptime across all systems, average client cost savings of 71%, presence in 27 countries. Every number was a direct challenge to Vertex's old way of thinking. "Innovation isn't just about building something new," I continued. "It's about having the courage to challenge established wisdom, especially when, those in power tell you you're wrong." From the back of the room, I saw Michael shift uncomfortably in his seat. After the keynote, I was swarmed by reporters, investors, and potential clients. CloudCore wasn't just successful anymore. We were setting the standard for the entire industry. The same ideas Michael had dismissed as trendy buzzwords were now being taught in business schools as case studies in revolutionary innovation. "Mr. Foster," a young reporter asked, "is it true that CloudCore's architecture was originally proposed to Vertex Solutions?" Before I could answer, I heard a familiar voice behind me. Yes, it was, and I threw it away. The crowd parted to reveal Michael Harrison, looking both defeated and determined. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. "Privately?" I nodded, leading him to a quiet corner of the conference center. Up close, I could see the toll the past 2 years had taken. Vertex's stock had plummeted 90%. Their clients had fled en masse, and their reputation for stability had been shattered. "I saw your numbers up there," he began. "They're impressive." "They're what I promised you 2 years ago," I replied. "Everything I showed you in that proposal has come true, exactly as predicted." He nodded slowly. "I know. That's why I'm here. The board, they're replacing me as CEO. Vertex is dying, Alex. We both know it. The market evolved," I said simply. "You chose not to." "I chose wrong," he admitted, and for the first time, I heard genuine regret in his voice. "I was so convinced I knew what our clients needed that I couldn't see the future when it was right in front of me, when you were right in front of me." I let that sink in for a moment. This was the admission I'd once thought I wanted to hear. But now, standing in the aftermath of CloudCore's success, it felt almost unnecessary. "What do you want, Michael?" He pulled out a folder, an actual paper folder, so characteristically old school. "One last proposal. Not a merger, not a takeover. A chance to save what's left of Vertex by letting us become a CloudCore implementation partner. Let us help other companies migrate from legacy systems to your platform." The irony was almost too perfect. You want to help companies move away from the very systems you insisted they'd never abandon? "I deserve that," he nodded. "But think about it. Who knows the pain points of legacy systems better than we do? Who understands what's holding companies back?" I studied him for a moment. The old Michael would have come in with demands, with corporate swagger. This Michael was different, humbled, but perhaps finally ready to learn. "Give me one reason," I said. "One reason that isn't about saving Vertex." He thought for a moment. "Because I was wrong. Not just about the technology, but about you, about innovation, about everything, and maybe helping other companies avoid my mistakes is the best way to make that right. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to Sam. Remember that implementation partner program we discussed? Time to launch it. I'll have our team review the proposal, I told Michael. But understand something. If we do this, it's not about Vertex. It's about the clients who need to move forward. He nodded quickly. Of course. Thank you, Alex, for even considering. Don't thank me yet, I interrupted. You'll be starting from scratch. No special treatment, no guaranteed contracts. You'll have to earn every client's trust, just like we did. As he walked away, Sam appeared at my elbow. Are you seriously considering this? Why not? I smiled. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your competition. It's making them work for you. The next month was a blur of activity. CloudCore's partner program launched with Vertex as its first participant, though few realized the significance of that partnership. Michael stepped down as CEO, taking a much lower position leading Vertex's new cloud transition team. The tech press had a field day with the story. Former giant becomes implementation partner for innovative startup. But the real story wasn't in the headlines. It was in the quiet moments of transformation. One evening, I found Michael working late in our office, poring over CloudCore's documentation. Your architecture, he said, looking up as I passed. It's brilliant. I should have seen it back then. But you didn't, I replied. And that's why we're here now. He nodded slowly. You know what the worst part was? Watching you succeed, knowing I could have been part of it. Knowing I could have helped build this instead of fighting it. Everything happens for a reason, I said. CloudCore needed to be built outside Vertex's constraints. We needed to be free to innovate without compromise. 6 months later, I stood in my office at CloudCore's new headquarters, looking out over Seattle's skyline. On my desk sat an article from Tech Quarterly. CloudCore revolutionizes enterprise software. How a rejected proposal changed an industry. My phone buzzed. A message from Sam. You need to see this. Vertex just completed their 100th successful migration to CloudCore. They're actually getting good at this. I smiled, thinking of that Trom wastebasket in Michael's old office. Sometimes the best ideas rise from the trash, finding their way to success through unexpected paths. Another message popped up, this time from Michael. Just heard from the Martinez Group. They're recommending us to their partners for CloudCore migration. Never thought I'd be grateful for being proven wrong. I typed back. Innovation is about being willing to change. Better late than never. Looking at CloudCore's current metrics displayed on my wall screen, I felt a sense of completion. We hadn't just built a successful company. We had transformed an industry. Every client migrated, every system modernized, every partner brought on board was proof that innovation couldn't be stopped, only temporarily delayed. The final vindication hadn't come from proving Michael wrong. It had come from proving that good ideas find their way to success, even if they have to take the long way around. As I prepared to leave for the day, I passed our company motto, now emblazoned on the wall in our lobby. Innovation doesn't ask permission. It simply shows the way forward. Below it, in smaller text, was the date Michael had thrown away my proposal, a reminder not of failure, but of the moment everything began to change. Success, I had learned, wasn't about revenge. It was about having the courage to build something better, even when others couldn't see it. And sometimes the people who try to stop you end up working to help your vision succeed. That, more than any market share or stock price, was the real victory. Rain fell on my father's casket as Michael delivered his eulogy. My older brother, the golden child, the tech prodigy, stood there in his tailored suit, talking about Dad's entrepreneurial spirit and how he'd carry on the family legacy. I stood silently, clutching my worn laptop bag. Inside was the prototype that had consumed the last 3 years of my life. A revolutionary chip design that could transform artificial intelligence processing. Dad had been the only one who believed in it. Your sister Olivia, Michael's voice pulled me back to the present, will always have a place in our family's company, just as Dad wanted. The implied charity in his tone made my jaw clench. Classic Michael, using even our father's funeral to reinforce his position as the family's successful son. The rain intensified, but I barely noticed. After the service, Michael found me in Dad's study. I was looking at the wall of family photos, mostly Michael's achievements. His college graduation, the launch of his first startup, the day he took over as CEO of Wilson Dynamics. "We need to discuss the company," he said, closing the door. I knew what was coming. Dad had left his 30% stake in Wilson Dynamics to be split between us. Michael already owned 45%, and now he wanted total control. "I'll buy your shares," he stated, pulling out a checkbook. "Market value plus 10%. Generous, considering you've never contributed to the company's success." I thought about my prototype, about the countless nights I'd spent in my small lab while Michael built his empire using Dad's connections. I'd rather keep my shares. He laughed, that condescending sound I'd heard my entire life. "And do what with them? Vote on company decisions? You barely understand what we do." "I understand more than you think." "Really?" He perched on Dad's desk, radiating smug superiority. "Tell me, what exactly do you understand about running a tech company from your little garage lab? About managing hundreds of employees? About competing in the AI market?" The AI market, if he only knew. "I understand enough to keep my shares." His amusement turned to irritation. "Listen, Liv. You're my sister, and I'll always take care of you. But let's be realistic. You'll never make it in tech without me. Stay in your little lab. Work on your hobby projects. Leave the real business to people who know what they're doing." Something in me snapped. 10 years of condescension, of being the quirky younger sister who played with electronics while Michael became the tech industry star. "Is that what you really think?" "It's what I know." He stood, straightening his suit. "You're not built for this world, Liv. Dad knew it too. Why do you think he left you the smaller share?" I grabbed my laptop bag. Maybe because he knew I didn't need it. Michael blocked my path. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I don't need your help, your money, or your approval." I met his eyes. "And someday, you'll understand exactly how wrong you've been. Is this about your little pet project?" He gestured to my bag. "That chip design you kept bothering Dad about? Wake up, Liv. If it was worth anything, don't you think someone would have noticed by now?" I smiled, remembering Dad's last words to me. "Patience, sweetheart. Let them underestimate you. It's your greatest advantage." "Someone to notice," I said quietly. Dad noticed. He helped me file the patents 6 months ago. Michael's expression flickered. "Patents?" "International coverage. Core technology for AI processing architecture." I stepped around him. "But don't worry about it. It's just a hobby project, right?" "Wait." His voice had lost its condescension. "What exactly did you patent?" "Stay in your little lab," I quoted back to him. "Leave the real business to people who know what they're doing." I left him standing in Dad's study, surrounded by his own achievements, finally showing the first hint of uncertainty I'd ever seen in his expression. That night, in my little lab, actually a sophisticated workspace I'd built in a converted warehouse, I reviewed the final prototype tests. The neural processing architecture I'd developed wasn't just an improvement on existing technology. It was a fundamental reimagining of how AI systems could function. Dad had understood immediately. While Michael focused on marketing existing tech, I'd been quietly revolutionizing the foundation of AI processing itself. The patents Dad helped me secure weren't just protective. They were potentially industry-changing. My phone buzzed. "Michael, we should discuss your patents. Dinner tomorrow?" I ignored it, focusing instead on an email from Jessica Martinez at the patent office. Final approval confirmed. Documentation complete. Another message from Michael. "Whatever you're planning, remember who has the resources to actually bring products to market." I smiled, thinking about the meetings I had scheduled for next week. Venture capitalists, tech reviewers, potential partners. All arranged quietly over the past 6 months with Dad's guidance. Going to bed, "Dr. Wilson?" My assistant Sophie called from the lab entrance. She was the only other person who knew the full scope of what we'd developed. "Almost done," I replied, making final adjustments to the presentation I'd be giving next week. "Just refining some details. Your brother's company announced their new AI platform today," Sophie mentioned casually. "They're calling it revolutionary." I nodded, unsurprised. Michael always announced products before they were ready, counting on his marketing team to bridge the gap between promise and reality. "Should we be worried?" Sophie asked. "No." I closed my laptop, thinking about the technical specifications I'd seen in Wilson Dynamics' public filings. They're still using conventional architecture. They have no idea what's coming. That night, I dreamed about Dad. Not the sick man from the hospital, but the father who'd first taught me about electronics, who'd encouraged my curiosity, while everyone else focused on Michael's more visible achievements. "Your brother builds on the surface," he told me once. "You build from the foundation up. Both have value, but foundations last longer." I woke to 30 messages from Michael, each more demanding than the last. He wanted meetings, explanations, cooperation. The confident dismissal from the funeral was gone, replaced by barely concealed anxiety. Opening my work email, I found meeting confirmations from 3 major tech companies. They'd seen the patent filings. They understood the implications. Michael's last message caught my eye. "Don't do anything rash. We're family. We should work together." I thought about all the times he dismissed my work, all the condescending comments about my little lab and hobby projects, about his speech at Dad's funeral, his automatic assumption that I'd sell my shares, his certainty that I'd never succeed without him. "Working late tonight?" Sophie asked when I arrived at the lab. "Very late," I confirmed, setting up for another round of prototype testing. We'd got a lot to prove. And somewhere across town, in his corner office with its wall of awards and magazine covers, my brother was about to learn that sometimes the biggest threats come from the people you least expect, especially the ones you've spent years underestimating. The Tech Summit conference room fell silent as I finished my presentation. Hundreds of industry executives, engineers, and investors stared at the performance metrics displayed on the giant screen behind me. These numbers, a senior engineer from Google spoke first. "They're verified, independently tested at 3 different labs," I confirmed, advancing to the next slide. "The neural processing architecture achieves 400% better performance while using 60% less power." The room erupted in murmurs. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably another message from Michael. He'd sent 43 in the past 2 days, each more desperate than the last. Dr. Wilson called out Janet Chen, a prominent venture capitalist. "What's your timeline for commercial implementation?" "We have working prototypes now," I replied, nodding to Sophie, who unveiled the sleek black processing unit. "Full-scale production could begin within 6 months." More murmurs. Everyone in the room understood what this meant. The AI processor market was worth billions, and I'd just demonstrated technology that made current solutions obsolete, including my brother's entire product line. After the presentation, I was surrounded by executives offering partnerships, investors promising blank checks, and engineers asking technical questions. In the corner, I spotted Wilson Dynamics' chief technology officer frantically typing on his phone. "Dr. Wilson," a quiet voice cut through the crowd. Marcus Zhang, CEO of Silicon Dynamics, extended his hand. "We should talk privately." 20 minutes later, in a secluded meeting room, Marcus got straight to the point. "Name your price. The technology isn't for sale." He smiled. "Everything's for sale. 10 billion? I thought about Michael's words at Dad's funeral, about staying in my little lab. "This isn't about money, Mr. Zhang. 15 billion. Exclusive rights." He slid a preliminary term sheet across the table. "You could fund 100 research labs with that." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. "Michael, your presentation is trending on tech Twitter. Call me immediately." "Excuse me," I told Marcus, "but I have other meetings scheduled, though I appreciate the offer." His smile faded. "Wilson Dynamics will be calling next. Your brother is probably very busy right now." Indeed, Michael was busy. His company's stock had dropped 18% since my presentation, as analysts digested the implications of my technology. Wilson Dynamics' much-hyped new AI platform, scheduled to launch next quarter, was now effectively obsolete before release. Sophie met me outside the conference center. "Your brother's here." "Here?" "In the lobby, with his entire executive team." I checked my phone. 67 missed calls, 112 messages, emails from Wilson Dynamics board members. "Should we use the back exit?" Sophie asked. "No," I straightened my jacket. "Time to face this head-on." Michael stood as I entered the lobby, his usual corporate polish showing cracks. His CTO hovered nearby, clutching a tablet full of my technical specifications. "We need to talk," Michael said, trying to sound authoritative, but missing by a mile. "I'm quite busy." "Damn it, Liv." His composure cracked. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Our stock is in freefall. Partners are calling about contract revisions. All because you couldn't. All because I couldn't what?" I cut in. "Succeed without you? Stay in my little lab? Leave the real business to people who know what they're doing." His face flushed. The executive team shifted uncomfortably. "The patents," his CTO interjected. "They're fundamental. We can't work around them. Every approach we've tried uses my architecture as a foundation," I finished. "Yes, I know." Michael stepped closer, lowering his voice. "What do you want?" "Want to license the patents, to sell them, to," he swallowed, "partner with Wilson Dynamics." I thought about the wall of his achievements in Dad's study, about a lifetime of condescension and dismissal. "I have a meeting with Intel in 20 minutes, I said, checking my watch. Their CEO flew in personally. "Intel?" Michael's voice cracked. "Liv, We're family. You can't. Family? I laughed. Now we're family. Not when you tried to buy my shares for pennies. Not when you mocked my work. Not when you used Dad's funeral to emphasize my supposed inadequacies. His executive team was openly staring now, seeing their invincible CEO stripped of his arrogance. At least talk to our board, he pleaded. They're meeting emergency session tomorrow. Can't. I'm having lunch with Apple's acquisition team. I started walking toward the elevator. Though I heard Silicon Dynamics made an interesting offer. Michael grabbed my arm. You would sell to our biggest competitor. I haven't decided to sell to anyone. I pulled free. But isn't this what you wanted? For me to learn about real business. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. Sophie held the door as I stepped in. Live, please. Michael's voice had lost all its corporate authority. Everything I've built was built on assumptions. I finished as the doors began to close. About me, about my work, about who gets to decide what success looks like. The last thing I saw was my brother's face, a mix of desperation and dawning comprehension that his dismissive little sister now held the power to reshape the entire industry. The next week was a blur of meetings, demonstrations, and increasingly dramatic offers. Wilson Dynamics stock continued to fall as more technical details emerged. Analysts called my architecture a paradigm shift. Competitors circled my brother's company like sharks scenting blood. Your brother's board called again, Sophie reported one evening as I reviewed licensing proposals. They're discussing removing him as CEO. I nodded, unsurprised. Michael had staked everything on his AI platform launch. Now it was worthless before it even hit the market. There's also this. She handed me a magazine. The cover showed Michael and me at Dad's funeral. Him at the podium, me in the rain. The headline read, Silicon Valley's biggest upset. How Wilson Dynamics missed the future in their own family. They want to know your next move, Sophie added. Everyone's waiting. I looked at the prototype humming quietly on my workbench. Dad had been right. Foundations matter more than surface appearances. Their lawyer called too, Sophie continued. Apparently, their preliminary analysis shows their entire product line might infringe on your patents. Might? Does infringe. Significantly. She paused. What are you going to do? I picked up my phone, looking at the dozens of missed calls from Michael. Each one a reversal of a lifetime of dismissal. Each one a recognition that the sister he'd underestimated now controlled his fate. First, I said, we're going to let them sweat a little longer. Then? I smiled, thinking about all those years in my little lab while Michael built his empire on shifting sand. Then we're going to teach some people a very expensive lesson about underestimating the wrong person. Because sometimes success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about waiting until proving them wrong hurts the most. The Wilson Dynamics boardroom looked exactly as I remembered it from childhood visits with Dad, all mahogany and leather, designed to intimidate. But today, sitting at the head of the table, while the board members waited nervously for me to speak, the room felt different. Maybe because my brother's usual seat was empty. The patent infringement is comprehensive. Wilson Dynamics chief counsel explained, sliding a thick document across the table. Our entire AI processing architecture relies on technology Dr. Wilson patented. Dr. Wilson, not Michael's sister or Ms. Wilson anymore. Amazing what a few $1 billion in market capitalization could do for one's professional courtesy. To be clear, another board member spoke up, without a licensing agreement. We can't ship any products. We'd lose every contract. The company would collapse. I finished. Yes, I know. The room fell silent. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see Michael pacing in his office across the courtyard. He hadn't been invited to this meeting, a fact that must have been killing him. We're prepared to offer significant compensation, the board chairman began. Full market value plus. I've already received better offers, I interrupted. Silicon Dynamics offered $15 billion for exclusive rights. Intel topped that yesterday. Apple called this morning. More silence. The chairman's face had gone pale. But you haven't accepted any offers, the CFO observed carefully. No. Because? I stood, walking to the windows. Michael had stopped pacing, staring directly at the boardroom. Even from this distance, I could feel the weight of his gaze. Do you know what my brother said to me at our father's funeral? I turned back to the board. He said I'd never make it in tech without him, that I should stay in my little lab and leave the real business to people who know what they're doing. The board members shifted uncomfortably. They'd all been there that day, watching Michael dismiss me in front of everyone. Here's my offer, I continued. Wilson Dynamics gets a non-exclusive license to my patent portfolio. You pay market rate royalties, just like everyone else will. No special treatment, no family discounts. But I'm not finished. I held up my hand. The license is contingent on some management changes. Michael steps down as CEO. Immediately, the chairman leaned forward. You want to take over? No, I smiled. I want him to learn the same lesson Dad taught me. Success isn't about titles or corner offices. It's about understanding what you actually contribute and who would run the company. Sophie Martinez will be here in 10 minutes. She's managed my research team for 5 years. She understands both the technology and its business implications. I paused. She also lacks any illusions about her own importance. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. Sophie, ready when you are. One more thing, I added. The company establishes a new R&D division. Real research, not just product development. And it operates independently, without interference from marketing or sales. You want to run it? The chairman asked. No, I want to choose who runs it, and I want it named after Dad. I met each board member's eyes. He always believed in building foundations, not just selling promises. The chairman glanced at the stock ticker displayed on the wall. Wilson Dynamics down 40% since my patent announcement. How long do we have to decide? Intel's offer expires at midnight. I gathered my papers. I suggest you choose quickly. Walking out, I stopped at Michael's office. He sat behind his desk, all his usual confident energy replaced by defeated stillness. The board's voting now, I said from the doorway, to accept your terms. His voice was hollow. To replace me. To save the company you nearly destroyed with your arrogance. He looked up sharply. I built this company. No, I cut in. Dad built this company. You inherited it and coasted on his reputation while ignoring actual innovation. How long since your R&D team developed anything genuinely new? His silence was answer enough. You know what your problem is, Michael? You've spent so long being the star that you forgot how to recognize real talent, even when it was right in front of you. In my defense, he managed a weak smile. You hit it pretty well in that little lab of yours. No, you just never bothered to look. I turned to leave, then stopped. By the way, Sophie's taking over as CEO. Try to learn something from her. She understands what you never did. That true leadership is about building things, not just taking credit for them. And what will you do? He asked. Take Silicon Dynamics' offer? I'm launching my own company. The patents will be licensed to anyone who can actually use them to build something worthwhile. I met his eyes. Even Wilson Dynamics, under its new leadership. Liv, he called as I reached the door. I was wrong. About you. About everything. I know. I smiled slightly. The question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge? The next month transformed the tech industry. My architecture became the new standard for AI processing. Wilson Dynamics, under Sophie's leadership, refocused on genuine innovation. Their stock recovered as investors gained confidence in the new direction. Michael, stripped of his titles, but still a major shareholder, did something unexpected. He went back to school, taking engineering courses to understand the technology he'd spent years marketing, but never really comprehended. My new company, housed in the same little lab where I developed the original patents, quickly became a hub for genuine innovation. We focused on foundations, just as Dad had taught me, letting others handle the marketing and sales. 1 year after my Tech Summit presentation, I received a package from Michael. Inside was a framed magazine cover, not one of his many glamour shots, but a recent article about Wilson Dynamics' revitalized R&D division. The division I'd insisted they name after Dad. A note was attached. You were right. Success isn't about who gets the credit. It's about who does the work. I hung it in my lab, next to Dad's old workbench that I'd kept all these years. A reminder that sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone's success. It's about teaching them what success really means. Last week, Michael stopped by the lab. No fancy suit, no corporate swagger. Just my brother, carrying a prototype he'd been working on in his engineering courses. Would you look at this? He asked, embarrassment and hope mixing in his voice. I could use some advice from someone who knows what they're doing. I smiled, clearing space on the workbench. Pull up a chair. Let's build something real. Because in the end, true victory isn't about proving people wrong. It's about teaching them how to be right.
The last thing I remember before the darkness took me was James Bennett's face, wearing an expression I'd never seen before. Was it concern? Fear? Or something else entirely? I couldn't tell because my vision was already blurring, my legs giving out as I collapsed in our company's parking garage. I'm Diana Mitchell, co-founder of Artemis Biotech, and that moment in the parking garage was the last time I would see my business partner and trusted friend for 3 months. 3 months during which he would try to steal everything we built together. The day had started normally enough. James and I were preparing for a crucial board meeting about our breakthrough cancer treatment delivery system. 5 years of research, countless sleepless nights, and our entire life savings had gone into developing this technology. We were weeks away from final FDA approval. The Morgan Group is getting nervous, James had said during our morning coffee ritual. They think the approval process is taking too long. They knew the timeline when they invested, I replied, reviewing our presentation materials. Besides, the preliminary results are exceeding expectations. James had nodded, but something in his expression should have warned me. I'd known him since our days at Stanford Medical School. He was brilliant but always impatient, always looking for shortcuts. What if we explored other options? He suggested. Maybe sell to one of the major pharmaceuticals before approval, and let them control the distribution. I shook my head. That's not why we started this company. We want this treatment to be accessible, not locked behind corporate profits. He'd gone quiet then, that familiar crease between his eyebrows that appeared when he was plotting something. But I was too focused on our upcoming presentation to notice. The headache started around noon. By 2, my vision was blurring. By 4, as I walked to my car to get my backup presentation materials, everything went black. I woke up 3 months later in the intensive care unit at Seattle General. A rare brain aneurysm, they told me. I'd been in a coma for 12 weeks. But as I lay there, trying to piece together what had happened, something felt wrong. Your business partner visited a few times, the nurse mentioned casually. In the beginning, said you've been under a lot of stress with the company. I tried to reach for my phone, but my muscles were too weak from months of inactivity. Can you look up Artemis Biotech for me, please? The nurse pulled out her phone, and I watched her face change as she read. Oh, it says here the company was acquired by Bennett Pharmaceuticals 3 months ago. The founder, James Bennett, consolidated ownership after his partner, after you apparently resigned due to health concerns. The monitors tracking my heart rate spiked. Resigned? Consolidated ownership? My mind raced back to our last conversation, to the thumb drive I always wore on a chain around my neck. The one that contained recordings of all our major meetings, a habit I developed after losing crucial notes years ago. My necklace, I croaked. From my personal effects. Please. The nurse found it in the hospital safe, along with my other belongings. With shaking hands, I clutched the small drive. James didn't know about this. He couldn't know that I recorded everything, including our last conversation about selling the company. But I was too weak to do anything about it yet. The doctors said I needed at least 2 more weeks of recovery before they'd release me. 2 weeks during which I had to pretend to be more incapacitated than I was, because I knew James would be watching. I was right. He visited the next day, all concerned smiles and gentle condolences. Diana, thank God you're awake, he said, sitting beside my bed. We were all so worried. I feigned greater weakness than I felt, keeping my eyes half closed. The company, what happened? Don't worry about that now, he soothed. Focus on getting better. I had to make some hard decisions while you were unavailable. But it was all for the best. Through my half-closed eyes, I saw that expression again, the one from the parking garage. Now I recognized it, calculation. The treatment, I whispered, is being developed on schedule, he assured me. Under proper corporate oversight now, Bennett Pharmaceuticals has the resources to bring it to market efficiently. Translation. They would control the pricing, the distribution, everything we have fought to prevent. You should rest, he said, standing. I'll have the lawyers send over some paperwork for you to sign once you're stronger. Just finalizing the transfer of your shares, making everything official. I let my eyes close fully, listening to his footsteps retreat. In my hand, hidden under the blanket, I clutched the thumb drive containing his true intentions. That night, using the nurse's phone, I sent a text to Maria Santos, my old friend from law school. Need help. Hospital. Come alone. Tell no one. Maria arrived the next morning, her lawyer face on until she saw me. Then she burst into tears. My God, Diana, we thought you were dying, James told everyone. I bet he did, I said grimly. Listen carefully. I need you to do something for me, and no one can know, especially not James. I handed her the thumb drive and whispered my instructions. Her eyes widened as she listened. He really didn't know you record everything, she asked. A habit he used to tease me about, I smiled weakly. Called me paranoid for keeping such detailed records. How long have you been doing this? Since the day we founded Artemis. Every major meeting, every significant conversation, including the one where he explicitly agreed never to sell or transfer ownership without mutual consent. Maria's legal mind was already working. The transfer would be invalid. He had no authority. But he did it anyway, I said. Used my medical crisis to steal everything. And now he's going to learn why you should never betray someone who keeps receipts. Over the next week, I focused on recovery while Maria quietly gathered intelligence. James had moved fast during my coma, using his family name and connections to push through the ownership transfer. He told our investors I had resigned for health reasons, that I'd agreed to sell my shares before my collapse. But he'd made one crucial mistake. In his rush to seize control, he'd violated dozens of clauses in our operating agreement, all of which I had documented evidence to prove. The board is meeting next Thursday, Maria reported during one of her visits. Final approval of the acquisition structure. James is consolidating his power base. Perfect. That gives us a week to prepare my return. Diana, Maria hesitated. Are you sure you're strong enough? I pushed myself up in the bed, muscles screaming but determination burning. I didn't spend 5 years of my life developing a treatment to help people just to watch him turn it into another profit machine. I'm not just going to return, I'm going to take everything back. She nodded, understanding the look in my eyes. I'll set everything in motion. Just promise me one thing. What? When you walk into that boardroom, make sure I'm there to see his face. I smiled, feeling stronger by the minute. Oh, don't worry. Everyone's going to want to see his face when he realizes what I've got on that thumb drive. James had no idea what was coming. He thought he'd stolen my company while I was fighting for my life. He was about to learn that some battles don't end just because one side is temporarily down. I spent the next few days preparing for war, disguising my recovery progress from the nurses I couldn't trust. Knowing James probably had people watching, every moment of weakness had to look real, every setback convincing. Because next Thursday, I wasn't going to walk into that boardroom as a victim. I was going to walk in as an avenging angel armed with irrefutable proof of his betrayal. And James Bennett was about to learn why you should never underestimate a partner who keeps records of everything, especially one you've left for dead. 3 days before the board meeting, I checked myself out of the hospital against medical advice. The doctors protested, but I had more important medicine to administer, the kind that cures betrayal. Maria had secured a suite at the Four Seasons under her law firm's name. James's people would be watching my house, expecting me to still be in the hospital. We needed complete privacy for what was coming next. The thumb drive contained even more than we hoped, Maria said, spreading documents across the hotel room's desk. Not just the conversation about never selling, but evidence of his preparations before your accident. I leaned forward, muscles still protesting but mind sharp. What kind of preparations? She pulled up an audio file on her laptop. James's voice filled the room, speaking to someone 2 weeks before my collapse. The FDA approval is taking too long. Diana won't budge on selling, but there might be another way. I've already talked to my father's pharmaceutical company. I felt ice in my veins. The date on this? 2 weeks before your aneurysm, Maria confirmed. And there's more. We found emails to a doctor at Seattle General asking about the statistical likelihood of aneurysms in people your age, particularly under stress. The implications made my hands shake. He didn't just take advantage of my condition. He was counting on it. We can't prove he caused your aneurysm, Maria cautioned. But we can prove he was planning this takeover before you got sick. That alone violates at least 15 clauses in your partnership agreement. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah Wong, our former head of research who had quit the day after James announced the acquisition. Boss, please tell me you're really alive and fighting back. The new protocols they're implementing, they're changing everything we built. I responded quickly. Very much alive. How would you like your old job back? Her reply was instant. When and where? I've got dozens of emails documenting the changes they're making to the treatment protocols. They're going to price it out of reach for most patients. Exactly what we had fought to prevent. I forwarded her message to Maria. Another witness, Maria nodded. But we need more. The board members who approved the transfer. They were lied to. I finished. And I bet James didn't keep very good records of those lies. A knock at the door made us both freeze. Maria checked the security camera we'd installed. It was Michael Chen, our former CFO, looking nervous. I heard rumors, he said when we let him in. That you were awake, that something big was coming. He looked at me. I saved copies of everything, Diana. All the financial records from before he pushed me out. I smiled. Tell me, Michael, did James follow proper procedures when he transferred the company assets? Michael's answering grin was vicious. Not even close. I've got proof of at least 3 major violations of SEC regulations. Been keeping them safe, waiting for this moment. The pieces were falling into place. Over the next 2 days, more former employees reached out. Each had saved evidence, each had witnessed James's betrayal, and each was eager to help take him down. But our biggest ally came from an unexpected source. Ms. Mitchell. The voice on the phone was elderly, dignified. This is Margaret Bennett, James's mother. I sat up straighter. Margaret Bennett was a legend in biotech circles, though she'd retired years ago. I've been watching what my son did to you, she continued. It's despicable. His father and I taught him better than this. A pause. I have documents you might find interesting. Board meeting minutes that contradict James's version of events. Why help me? I had to ask. Because I believe in what you and James originally set out to do, she replied. Making treatments accessible, not just profitable. He's lost his way. Perhaps it's time for a reminder of what matters. The morning before the board meeting, I stood in front of the mirror in my hotel suite, practicing standing without showing weakness. My body was still recovering, but I couldn't let them see that. Maria burst in, waving her phone. You need to see this. James just sent a press release to the major news outlets. He's announcing Bennett Pharmaceuticals' complete acquisition of Artemis Biotech, claiming you've signed off on everything. Perfect, I smiled. He's just made this much easier. How? Because announcing an acquisition based on fraudulent documents, that's not just a contract violation, that's securities fraud. We spent the final hours preparing everything. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence carefully organized. The thumb drive's contents backed up in multiple secure locations. At 6 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from James himself. Heard you checked out of the hospital. Hope you're feeling better. The paperwork for your share transfer is ready whenever you're up for it. I showed Maria the message. Should I respond? She grinned. No need. He'll be seeing you soon enough. That night, I could barely sleep, my mind racing with what was to come. I remembered all the late nights James and I had spent in the lab, dreaming of how our treatment would help people. How had he gone from that idealistic researcher to someone who would betray everything we built? At dawn, I received another unexpected call, this time from Robert Morgan of the Morgan Group, our biggest investor. Just wanted you to know, he said without preamble, we never believed you'd voluntarily walk away. We've been waiting, watching. Tomorrow's board meeting should be interesting. I smiled. You have no idea. Maria arrived early, carrying a garment bag. If we're going to war, we're doing it in style. Inside was a perfectly tailored black suit that made me look less like a recovering patient and more like an avenging CEO. My phone kept buzzing with messages from other employees, investors, even competitors who had heard rumors of my return. Each one added another piece to the puzzle of James's betrayal, another witness to his lies. At 8 a.m., Maria's associate confirmed that James had arrived at the office, looking confident and relaxed as he prepared for what he thought would be a routine board meeting. He just sent out the agenda, the associate reported. First item: finalizing the acquisition and your removal from all corporate documents. I checked my appearance one final time. The woman in the mirror looked powerful, unstoppable. No trace of the hospital patient remained. Ready? Maria asked, holding up the thumb drive that would destroy James's carefully constructed house of lies. I took it, feeling its weight, not just physical, but moral. This small piece of technology contained not just recordings, but the truth about betrayal, about corruption, about the difference between power and right. The car's waiting, Maria said. Everyone's in position. I nodded, thinking of James sitting in that boardroom, probably rehearsing how he would announce my official removal from the company we had built together. He had no idea what was coming. Let's go, I said, stepping toward the door. It's time to remind James why you should never betray someone who keeps receipts. The drive to Artemis Biotech's headquarters felt surreal. Every familiar landmark brought back memories of building this company, of the dreams we'd had, of the trust James had shattered. But I wasn't going there to reminisce. I was going there to take back what was mine. The elevator ride to the 12th floor of Artemis Biotech felt like ascending to destiny. Standing beside me, Maria clutched her briefcase containing enough evidence to destroy James's carefully constructed lies. Behind us, Sarah Wong and Michael Chen waited silently, each carrying their own documented proof of James's betrayal. He's just started the meeting, Maria's associate texted, announcing the final phase of the acquisition. Perfect timing. The boardroom doors were closed, but through the glass walls I could see James standing at the head of the table, gesturing confidently as he presented his version of events. The board members sat around the massive oak table, some nodding, others looking uncertain. Ready? Maria whispered. I straightened my jacket, feeling the thumb drive hanging from its chain around my neck. Oh yes. I pushed open the doors. The reaction was immediate. James's voice cut off mid-sentence. His face, previously animated with fake sincerity, froze in an expression I'll never forget. Pure, unadulterated shock melting into fear. "Deanna," he stammered, "you're supposed to be in a coma? Dead, or just conveniently absent while you steal my company?" My voice carried clearly across the suddenly silent room. "Sorry to disappoint, James." Board members half rose from their chairs. Robert Morgan, our lead investor, actually smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen," I continued, walking steadily to the center of the room, "I believe there are some details about this acquisition that James forgot to mention. This meeting is private." James tried to recover. "You're no longer." Actually, Maria stepped forward. "Ms. Mitchell very much is still an owner of this company. The documents claiming otherwise were fraudulently filed." "Ridiculous," James scoffed, but his face had gone pale. "We have her resignation, her transfer of shares." "Forged," I cut him off, while I was unconscious. "But then that was the plan all along, wasn't it?" I nodded to Michael, who began distributing packets to each board member. "These are the real financial records, showing unauthorized transfers and multiple violations of SEC regulations. And these," Sarah added, passing out her own documents, "show the changes made to our treatment protocols. Changes that would make the therapy unaffordable for most patients, violating our core mission and FDA approval parameters." James's face had gone from pale to ashen. "The board approved." "The board was lied to," I interrupted again. "You told them I had agreed to sell before my medical emergency. But I have proof that's not true." I unclasped the necklace and held up the thumb drive. "Would you like to hear our last conversation, James? The one where you suggested selling to your father's company and I explicitly refused. Or should we skip to the part where you discussed my convenient medical crisis before it happened?" His eyes fixed on the thumb drive with horror. You recorded everything," I finished. "Every meeting, every conversation. I have it you used to mock, remember? Called me paranoid for documenting everything." The board members were flipping through the packets, murmuring among themselves. Robert Morgan looked up sharply at James. "Is this true?" he demanded. "Did you orchestrate this takeover knowing Ms. Mitchell had refused?" I was protecting the company's interests," James tried. "The delays in FDA approval were normal and expected." I cut in. "As you well knew, what wasn't normal was you contacting doctors about aneurysm statistics weeks before I collapsed." That revelation sent a shockwave through the room. James actually staggered back. "You have no proof." I nodded to Maria, who opened her laptop. James' own voice filled the room. "Yes, doctor, I'm particularly interested in stress-induced aneurysms. Someone about 40, female, under extreme work pressure." The recording cut off into dead silence. "Would you like to hear the rest?" I asked quietly, "or should we move on to the evidence of securities fraud from this morning's press release?" "This is absurd," James sputtered. "You can't just walk in here and—" "Actually, she can." A new voice spoke from the doorway. Margaret Bennett, James's mother, stepped into the room. "And as a major shareholder in Bennett Pharmaceuticals, I'm very interested in hearing about my son's creative business practices." James actually stumbled. "Mother, what are you doing what I should have done months ago?" She cut him off. "Stopping you from destroying everything your father and I built." The next hour was a blur of revelations. Every piece of evidence was examined, every lie exposed. James tried several times to defend himself, but each attempt was met with another document, another recording, another witness to his betrayal. Finally, Robert Morgan stood up. "I believe we've seen enough. I move to nullify all transfers and acquisitions made during Ms. Mitchell's incapacity, and to remove James Bennett from any position of authority in Artemis Biotech." The vote was unanimous. "You can't do this," James whispered, but there was no force behind it anymore. The company needs to return to its original mission," I said firmly, "making life-saving treatments accessible to everyone, not just those who can afford premium prices." Margaret stepped forward. "Bennett Pharmaceuticals will be withdrawing all claims to Artemis Biotech, and James," she fixed her son with a steel gaze, "the family board would like to speak with you. Immediately." As James was led out, looking shell-shocked and defeated, Sarah approached with more documents. "The FDA approval came through this morning. The original protocols, not the modified ones. We can proceed as planned." I looked around the boardroom. at the supporters who had helped me fight back, at the board members who now understood the truth, at the company I had nearly lost but have fought to reclaim. Ms. Mitchell, Robert Morgan approached. The board would like to officially reinstate you as CEO, with full control over company direction, assuming you're well enough. I smiled, thinking of all those hours in the hospital planning this moment. Oh, I'm well enough. We have a lot of work to do. In the weeks that followed, the story of James' attempted takeover became a cautionary tale in business circles. Bennett Pharmaceuticals distanced themselves completely, with Margaret Bennett taking a personal interest in ensuring their company ethics were reformed. James, stripped of his positions in both companies, was last seen booking a flight to some remote destination. The SEC investigation into his activities was just beginning. Artemis Biotech not only survived but thrived. Our treatment received full approval, and under the original pricing structure, it would help thousands who couldn't afford existing options. One afternoon, as I sat in my restored office, Sarah brought in a package that had been found in James's desk. Inside was my original badge, the one declaring me co-founder and CEO. You know what the irony is? She said as I pinned it back on. If he had just waited, if he had stuck to our mission instead of getting greedy, he would have been part of something amazing. Sometimes people can't see past their own ambition, I replied. But that's why we keep records, to remind everyone of the truth. I touched the thumb drive, now mounted in a frame on my wall alongside a news article about our FDA approval. It served as a reminder that sometimes the best defense isn't just being right, it's being able to prove it. Maria stopped by later with a final report. All legal challenges had been dismissed, our patents were secure, and James' attempts to claim any ownership had been permanently blocked. Want to know the best part? She grinned. Every time he tries to start a new venture, potential investors find the records of what he did here. Turns out, trying to steal a company from your partner while she's in a coma is bad for your business reputation. I looked out my office window at the Seattle skyline, thinking of all the patients who would now have access to our treatment. The company wasn't just saved, it was stronger, more focused on its mission than ever. You know, Maria mused, most people would have just fought to get their shares back. But you did more. You exposed the whole scheme, protected the mission, saved the science. Because it was never just about ownership, I replied. It was about doing what's right. And now everyone knows exactly how far some people will go to do what's wrong. That evening, as I prepared to leave, I passed the research lab where James and I had first developed our breakthrough. The lights were on, and through the glass, I could see Sarah and her team working late, dedicated to the mission we'd started years ago. I touched the frame holding the thumb drive one last time. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just exposing a betrayal, it's showing everyone that the truth always finds a way to surface. James had tried to bury me, not realizing that I had planted seeds of truth that would grow into his downfall. He thought my medical crisis was his opportunity, never suspecting that his own words would be his undoing. The company flourished, the treatment helped thousands, and the story of how careful documentation defeated corporate greed became a legend in the biotech world. And every time someone new toured our offices, they would see that framed thumb drive and learn the most important lesson in business. Never betray someone who keeps records of everything, especially when they're fighting to protect something bigger than themselves.